Okay, it is 6:30. I am going to call for opening the Marshfield Conservation Commission meeting for September 21st, 2021. I move that we open. May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We have the minutes from the August 17th, 2021 meeting. Has everyone on the commission had an opportunity to see them?
Yes.
No changes, comments? Okay. Then I move that we vote to approve the minutes for August 17th, 2021. May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. I have no specific comments from the chair this evening, so I'm going to just go into the business items. B1, de minimis activity roll. First item is 667 Ocean Street, a generator stand installation. This is an installation of a generator stand utilizing diamond pier footings. This is to replace an existing stand that does not meet floodplain standards. This is a pre-disturbed site in land subject to coastal storm flowage, AE9, and Barrier Beach coastal dune. Based on our recent floodplain permitting, this qualifies as de minimis, so I move that we vote it as such. May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The next is Mayflower Lane, hazardous tree removal. Removal of one tree that was dislodged by a recent storm and is now threatening and leaning towards the house. May I have, I move that we vote this as a de minimis activity. May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
34 Allerton Road, vegetative management. Cutting of several trees along the border of an isolated land subject to flooding and removal of dead/cut vegetation from the site. By the way, in all of these, the special conditions are obtain all pertinent permits prior to beginning work. I move that we vote this as a de minimis activity for vegetative management. May I have a second?
Second.
Susan.
All in favor?
Aye.
And finally, we have 230 Webster Street, Council on Aging solar panel installation. The solar panel installation is taking place mostly outside of conservation jurisdiction. A small portion of the work is within the 100-foot buffer to a wetland on the west side of the property. The limit of work is an existing parking lot area. The plans detail the locations for the solar panels, which will all be within a previously disturbed environment. Special conditions are to obtain all pertinent permits prior to starting work. I move that we vote to ratify this as a de minimis activity. May I have a second?
Second.
Art.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Business item 2 concerns a complaint regarding 313 Cariswell Street, unpermitted cutting and removal of wetland vegetation. And I believe both Agent Flint and Administrator Grafton were on site, so perhaps you would like to
Sure.
Flip a coin, or you want to go?
I can take it, Bill.
You got that? All right.
So we responded to a complaint on September 11th. We received video and photos of vegetation being removed next to an isolated vegetated wetland. We went to the site that Monday on the 13th and spoke with one of the residents there. They advised us that they had been removing weeds from a shed in the back of the yard. From what I saw, it looked to be just along the edge of the yard. It was clearly right up into the wetlands because one of the plants that had been pulled was it had a wetland flag on it from the recent filing next door. But overall, I don't think it was, very serious work, and I think it's possible that a verbal warning could be sufficient in this case. I can share some pictures and I can share the recorded video if you would like here.
Can I speak on this?
Not yet. You can when the chair acknowledges you.
I'll just put up the photo for now. This is basically the area in question. So we're talking about right at the edge of the yard. See here is the weed that was removed that had the flag on it. I don't really have too much to comment on it other than what I've said already on this one. Bill, if you have anything else?
No, I would say that, they were also video surveillance, so they were looking up. Other parties had mentioned that, so I think there was some awareness that they knew that they were pushing it. We've talked to them, they get it. It really wasn't that big a deal. If they called us and talked to us, we probably would have said, go for a de minimis activity. And I think the commission, even though they're down to the wetlands, we probably would have kept them out of the wetland line, explained that a little bit to them. But in fact, this area it's open to the sun. It gets hammered and you get weeds in there and vines, and it looks like that's what they were pulling out. So, we have to distinguish between beneficial plants and potential weeds and so on. So I'm buying into this argument. Until I walked over and saw that, I wasn't. So I'm pretty convinced now.
And you are the homeowner?
Yes, I'm the homeowner. I've lived there for 41 years. I've weeded there many times.
Could you do me a favor? What is your name and what is your address?
Florence Brubo, 313 Careswell Street.
Thank you.
I've weeded there many times. I was not aware Brian Rhodes had a camera on me and why he'd be photoing me. When he seen me weed there, I weed around those 3 rhododendrons all the time. But I think it's retaliation with my complaint against him. And the reason that's laying down is when I pulled one of the weeds, that came up. So I laid it right back down where it came out. And I was just weeding because all this thorny stuff was growing on my shed. So that's what we were basically doing. I didn't think I was doing anything wrong.
Okay.
And, I maintained it for
After
quite a
that
while.
DNA or something.
Yeah, I certainly don't think this rises to the level of an enforcement.
But they should have some kind of permit, right?
Can I ask what Dominicus?
De minimis means it does not require any higher level of permitting. We have requests for determinations of applicability, and we have notices of intent, depending on how much of an impact something is having on a wetland area that we have jurisdiction over.
I've been trying to keep that clear because that is drainage, which will come up when we discuss 12 Edwards Road.
Mhm.
That's what I'm concerned with because my yard floods now.
Okay. Do any other commissioners want to comment on this?
Looks reasonable.
So only thing I'd say is this, is we picked up something new here. This is a kind of a routine habit, which is probably not an issue, but they don't have anything. So maybe they come back and they do a de minimis activity for doing this. So we keep it constrained to what they're doing here, which is not, I don't think it's a big deal.
No.
Just thought, the complaint goes away, and then going forward, everybody knows this is gonna happen. This is allowed by the commission. They're not triggering a larger need for a notice of intent or an RDA, as you aptly proposed, Chair Hanifin.
Yeah, is it even necessary to come back for a de minimis? I
Well-
think everybody is clear on what's happening here. She's been living there for 40 years. I am satisfied with voting to determine that whatever conversation you had to clarify the situation is sufficient.
I would agree.
Okay. In that case, I move that we vote to determine that the activity does not warrant further action from the Conservation Commission, and we will consider the verbal warning to be sufficient to close this complaint. May I have a second?
Second?
That would be darn close.
That was Rick.
Rick doesn't have any, so I'm gonna give Rick this one, Susan, if you don't mind.
I'm too quick.
All in favor?
Aye.
Oh, that's, hold on
Oh.
a second. Let's get, Mr. Galvin to join us. Okay. Alrighty. Just need to delay a game for a second.
Okay, Bill?
And, Okay.
Can I move on, or?
Yeah, that's fine.
Item B3 concerns the transfer of a parcel on Old Mount Scargo from the DPW to Conservation. This was before us on August 17th, and we are looking at a choice between transferring this to Conservation under Article 97 or requiring a conservation restriction held by a third party. Would you like to chime in,
Yeah,
Administrator Grafton?
Yeah, okay, we need 5 minutes for town council, because there's some legalities here which the
Okay.
commission may want. I will give an overview, to the best extent I can. Basically, I'm just gonna paraphrase what, I've explained before. That is that this is a natural heritage endangered species program, mitigation required for the remainder of the ball fields and all of the Boys and Girls Club, which never got completed. These discussions started a good 10 years ago or so, and so this particular lot was picked as suitable for natural heritage. And they have two avenues that they can provide for protection and allowing for their mitigation of rare species. And the first is Article 97 with a deer restriction, and the second is with a conservation restriction and a third party. So I think that opens up a little bit of questions that I've received, and I tried to do some answering. And basically, land protection can be done with physical things like fencing, guards, signage. Okay. Town-owned properties can also be protected with Article 97, which came about in 1972, about the time of the Wetlands Protection Act. There have been additional legal suits and so on that have tested the merits. I will note for the record.
Please note that Commissioner Ring has arrived.
Correct.
Thank you.
At 6:44 PM. Thank you, Commissioner Ring. JR arrives. Let's get that down. And Article 97 has been tested and strengthened over the years because, like anything new, there are gaps within. So they basically had strengthened that over time. There's also conservation restrictions, which can be put on private properties or they can be put on public properties. Straight up documents, which can strengthen, you might argue, some of the Article 97, or in the case of the third-party requirement, you can have a conservation restriction that's managed by a grantee, such as, Mass Audubon, or trustees of reservations, or Wildlands Trust, or some other entity. So that's a third option right there. The DPW property that's in question here, E0801-01A, is 25 acres, and that nets out to close out the other two projects. The Rockwood Ball Fields, which was partially completed with Article 97, transfer to Concom of the Couch Beach, and then the Boys and Girls Club entirety to close that one out. So that's sort of the overall arching rationale behind this. And I would say that the town has been setting aside land since the early 1800s or 1900s or something like that, well before any of this stuff got established. And you have a variety of different types of protections that are out there. Someone asked me if I knew of any cases where Article 97 got, taken out of protection, and it takes a tremendous amount of effort that I think town council can explain a little bit better than I can, to go through Concom, Board of Selectmen, town meeting, and then the state legislature in order to do that. So that takes a tremendous amount of reversal for that to happen, and every step of the way it can be blocked or stopped.
May I just chime in with
sure.
the specifics there? It requires a unanimous vote of the Conservation
yeah,
Commission,
great.
the approval of the Select Board, 2/3 vote of town meeting, compliance with State Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs policy and guidance, and a 9/10 vote of the Massachusetts legislator approving the removal of the Article 97 protection.
That was well put. So you can see it's pretty burdensome to remove that. Now, there's purposes for all of these tools. And in a property like this, I was looking at it, you have 1, 2, 3 other Concom lands that are set aside. And I was looking at the amount of frontage that it had with the town of Duxbury, and there's a house on the opposite side. And then there is a private property to the south, and VRT also.
Because they continue to ask for continuances, they also allow
Somebody's got a radio, a mic on or something, and I'm getting some background noise. Anyway, so on everything but a small amount of the linear footage, there's Concom properties that don't have CRs on them. I went and I looked at the open space plan, and it has Appendix E, which has all the properties protected under everything, Chapter 61, water, Board of Select, whatever the protection is. And only 11 of them have got CRs on them. I don't think that list is complete, because I know there was some effort put in to bring some of these other ones into conservation restrictions with third parties in some cases, and probably conservation restrictions that are just not logged in yet. So they have their value in different places, but my point here is simply use the one that's most appropriate that you need. When you have a high-value property, I think you need to have a third party. I would agree with that. You know, it's especially a encroachment. I look at the one over there in Clay Pit. We could really use some third party there. Though, you know, I think there's some issues there that would be helpful. This one's already surrounded. It's pretty remote. I don't think it's going to have a lot of issues. Probably save the money, use the CR somewhere else, and you know, there's a higher value. There are going to be other properties coming up, and I'm not adverse to going with a third-party nonprofit or whatever entity, or straight conservation restriction, or Article 97. They all have their place and value. So I just wanted to throw that out. I know Bob Galvin's here. I got Mike Moresco as well. If you want to talk to them at all about this, ask me questions. I want to make sure that you make an informed decision, and I've done my best.
Thank you. Would the commission, does the commission have questions for Attorney Galvin, or any comments or discussion that you would like to throw out there? I will state that I personally believe a third-party conservation restriction is the highest and best protection of this property. But as Bill points out, there are different options.
I would, can I speak?
Sure, absolutely.
I agree. You know, I understand the need to be conservative with town funds, but I think when we're talking about protecting valuable conservation land in perpetuity, the total cost for putting CRs from Wildland Trust, because they were engaged quite a while ago in doing draft CRs for these properties when this mitigation plan was first developed, $28,482.41 is for both of the properties. One is $13,654. The other is $14,828. That the difference in cost is reflective of the amount of time that would require to monitor it. The Mount Scourgo piece costs a little bit more because they require more time, given it's difficult to access the land. The Couch Beach one is a little bit less, so that describes the difference. They go into a lot of detail on how they propose to do annual monitoring. So I guess my concern is I've been involved in land protection in this town for a long time in various responsibilities for about 17 years, and I have principally worked with land that was acquired through CPC funds. And the CPC Act specifically requires conservation restrictions by third parties be held on all land that is purchased with taxpayer funds and using CPC. So I feel like that's a high standard, and that, from my view, is what we should be doing on these lands. I feel like my main problem with this is that there's no third-party oversight. There's no regular monitoring. The Conservation Commission, or we do not have people on the commission nor staff to do regular monitoring of these programs, of these properties. Article 97 does not detail exactly what activities can and cannot take place on these properties, such as installation of ancillary structures or uses. Ancillary structures and uses can contribute to the fragmentation of open space, wildlife habitat, and water supply protection, which are sort of the overreaching goals of why we protect most of this land. Inappropriate uses and structures can contribute to a deterioration of the scenic, aesthetic, and historic values of these properties. That undisturbed land can contribute to the quality of life of Marshfield. And I feel like this is our legacy at this point, that this is an important vote that could have long-term consequences in how we protect land in the future. So generally, the incursions to these land don't come from outside sources, they come from within. And that's not because people are ill intent. There's a lot of needs in the community that people will try to fulfill different needs and problems and solve them by using these properties. And so that can happen with no oversight, and it can, again, be done with no ill intent, but I feel like a third-party monitor will help us keep those requests in check. So that's my feeling.
Is that the highest level of protection for this land, is
Yeah.
third party
Yes.
with a conservation restriction?
It is.
It is.
Can you do a conservation restriction of the same sort without a third party?
You can, yeah.
This-
Bob can answer that better than me, but the answer is yeah. And it's done a lot, I've seen it. You don't necessarily have to have a third party. In the CPC, Susan's right, and Bert said it last time, you always have to have it. Effective right around 2010, 2012 is, when I was sitting in Norwell, I remember that came about, and they had changed that, because they wanted to secure that. But, I mean, it's monitoring, and it's not like they're gonna go out and help you with it. Joe, Bert, Art, and Craig, you were out there, you saw what we're dealing with. They're not gonna actually lift a shovel or anything. They're gonna tell us to do it. We can find it, and as well, so,
I think one of the big positives of having the third party is the monitoring feature.
Exactly.
You know, we do not have the capacity to monitor, and as we saw, those of us who were out yesterday, we found incursions into CR protected land that we would not have known about had
right.
the nonprofit third party not been out there monitoring.
Which is true. And then there's the one that we had that was glaringly obvious on Harlow, which was presented to the commission, I think, on February 4, 2020, which I discussed. And the commission, I had it sized up what it would cost to get that one out with equipment or two people doing the job. And it was $2,000 to $2,500 to get that out of there. And that was right next to the road, not deep in the woods. So the commission unanimously voted against that one, so I don't really see how that argument, I'm sorry, it's, the green waste is something that the commission has expressed, at least in that case, as not wanting touched. So when I got 9 sites out on a Holly Hill or whatever, and 6 of them are green waste, and they're gonna have to be backpacked out of there, or we're gonna have to get somebody to go in there and do that, and then there's tremendous follow-up. I'm not sure that's consistent with what the commission voted for on February 4, 2020. So I just want to remind the commission, whether you knew or not, that was voted on, and you pick up that legacy of what, the record shows.
I think pretty different properties, different circumstances. I don't think it's a good analogy. Susan, I was interested, the numbers that you gave, where did they come from?
Yeah, me too, Susan.
They were the Wildlands Trust produced cost estimates that they presented to the town.
So Wildlands Trust had already been more or less engaged with the town to do this?
It's my understanding that the draft CRs were done, so.
They never got completed. The notes are there that they never got completed.
But they were engaged they
Yeah.
began the
Yeah,
process
they may have been-
with enough,
Yeah.
they did the site walks,
Yeah.
so they had enough information to.
I think there's
to
an
come up with
investment.
cost
I think
estimates.
there's no doubt there was an investment. So I don't think that's an issue there. I think what happened was, during the process of the Couch Beach, we were going down the avenue of looking at the options, and it came up that Article 97 with the deed restriction was appropriate, which, for natural heritage. And so that opened the avenue for the two things. And the commission should judiciously, in my opinion, my humble opinion to the commissioners, is to consider which one is going to be most judicious for the value. I would say this one is not, even though they started down that road, this one would not be the one I'd put the money into to get the CR on with the third party. There are a lot of other ones that I would, that we might need help on. I picked Clay Pit because it's got issues right now, and we could use that, and that puts pressure in general to respond to that, and that we can then work with. This one's on its own, it's a little bit orphaned. It's got Duxbury on one side, you got VRT, you've got an unknown property, and you got a home. I think it's probably pretty safe that it's not gonna need a lot, so you're putting like 10 to 28,000 or whatever you're saying into that lot, and it's surrounded by 3 that don't have CRs. So I'm just trying to say economically even, just take everything else out. Why not save that money? And you've got other stuff that I think the Open Space Committee knows about where these things are appropriate, and I'm probably gonna be like, I'm all in on that because those are higher value. This one here needs to meet the space, the criteria for the habitat for turtles. And it might be their breeding, it might be their overwintering, it might be their foraging area. So this has been identified long before all of us. I'll stop now.
How many other examples have there been with town-owned land where absence of monitoring has created issues?
Carolina Hill.
Every
We
town
don't
in this
really
town.
know.
Carolina Hill.
Well, Carolina
We
Hill.
don't-
Yeah,
but
we just had that, but we responded. The commission directed me to find a way to solve that. We got 31 volunteers, we had town officials out there. We made a big presence, and Bert was involved too physically with that, so appreciate that, Bert. And that was a huge effort, and the town stood up. And it's really the most important thing that I didn't talk about land protection, is having a town riveted about protecting its land, whether it's Article 97, conservation restrictions straight, or conservation restrictions with a third party. It's a riveted, motivated town, and that's where we're trying to get it, Eric and I, to that level. I'm just saying to you, this one, Article 97, will solve this, but it doesn't mean that the CRs with third parties go away. I see that as part of the bailiwick, it's part of the solution source in general, and that's how I feel about it.
So, if we're having to make a decision, so I do agree with what Susan's saying and what Craig's saying, but if we're making a decision based on resources, I would like to see the metrics of what the value is to compare each one, and I would be for tabling this until we have those metrics to make a decision if we have to rank things, where we're putting the money. Otherwise, you know, I don't think you can make an intelligent decision
Well,
on
you-
that. I would be prepared to vote to support this. But if we bring in the ranking of where we have to spend the money, I would like to see that, to make a decision.
So you have a timing element. This has been placed as a holder, and there's a requirement for this land to be set aside through the natural heritage. They've been waiting. I've been trying to make that point. It's been a long time. So, and now affects phase 2 of the conservation, of the Couch Beach project. I'm not trying to put pressure, I'm just trying to make sure you understand that. It's also in a placeholder. Now, you can pull that and move to an annual town meeting, and then you can relook at this and give yourself more time. And that may dovetail with the project. Yeah, that could happen.
But isn't Couch Beach already protected under Article 97?
Correct, we have that, but what you don't have is Rockwood Ball Fields is not complete. And then the Boys and Girls Club is not complete, and they're somewhat linked. And that's what was conveyed. I don't have that in writing, but that's pretty much conveyed.
Well, I believe this whole issue has been taking place over, what, almost 10 years?
About that, yeah.
So I don't think it's appropriate to be pressured at this point to say, okay, we have a placeholder for fall town meeting, if in fact we think we need more information. One thing I would point out is Article 97 is a very, very high bar to get over, but it is not impossible.
Yeah, agreed.
There is a back door, and I think on Carolina Hill, was there a proposal for a wind turbine at
Yes.
some point? There is a town somewhere that I think subverted the Chapter 97 and built a solar array. So
Right.
it's not airtight.
Does the commission, since we have town council here, want to vet these things out, since we've got so many things that are being introduced each meeting? And each time I go back and I try to present everything so you can have a concrete decision. And I'm not trying to pressure, I'm just saying, wouldn't it be nice to just take advantage of that? Is there anything you want to hear from town council on this that might be helpful?
I have a question. My intention in bringing up the CR is that's my feeling is the highest level of protection should be put on land this valuable. However, it was never my intention to not accept this land under Conservation Commission so as not to hold up on the Couch Beach expansion and closing out this permitting that has to take place. And my question was, can we approve this with a condition and a caveat that we will work towards, there's some mechanism for us to ensure that
Well-
a third-party CR is put on the property at a later date, or,
I suppose, yeah. Are you?
I mean, I don't know if
you're on
that's
it.
even possible, how,
I don't know how, that's gonna have to be some with Bob, but I think you need, one thing I've been trying to do is both provide you with details and specific questions that were asked, and now I got a new one, Art, thanks, everybody, I will continue to do this. If I could get them all at once, then I'll do my best, this takes a little research, okay? But, long story short, since we have town council here also, we should chat with him about that, but I wanted to expand the awareness of all the options, and it isn't only Wildlands Trust. It's Mass Audubon. It's also Trustees of Reservation, and they've done really well on their projects as well. So I think we talked about when we were in the field, the value. We're gonna be giving feedback to Wildlands Trust through the chair here, because we need value in this feedback. We can't be just going down and hunting down something in the middle of the wooded area without a longitude or some kind of flagging. I could find new things by taking another half an hour out there, no problems. Some of these properties have got historical issues. They were taken that way.
One more point, Bill.
Yeah,
If this land is being used as mitigation,
right.
who determined, now this is a little bit out of my area of expertise, but you have to have a conservation management plan, correct?
No, I think what happened is this was, you have to have a conservation restriction with a third party holding it. It's for natural heritage, that's one option. The second thing was a Article 97 with a deed restriction. And Rod, I asked actually when I was talking with the town engineer and the chief of regulatory review at the Natural Heritage and Endangered Species Program, and I asked, do we need a conservation restriction? He said, no. I'm looking for town council
No,
to,
I'm talking about, I'm sorry to
Yeah,
butt
yeah,
in,
no problems.
But the conservation management plan, because it's to manage endangered species, isn't there?
a CMP.
Yes.
So what is happening is sometimes you'll have off-site. An example would be in Norwell, they had a cemetery project and they had to take a certain amount of EBT, Eastern Box Turtle habitat, and off-site, which is what's happening here, they picked another location. So you don't need to have a CMP. Now, the CMP in the case of Couch, just to simplify it, you're right, is Couch Cemetery has to have a conservation management plan, and they had to have a certain amount of set aside. That was achieved by Article 97, Couch Cemetery, Couch Beach to the Concom. Now what we're missing is the ball fields, partially missing on the ball fields, I get confused, and the Boys and Girls Club completely, because it's before my time, 25 acres. And those are gonna both be off-site. So they don't need a CMP, but you get an off-site mitigation, and it satisfies the natural heritage. There's a lengthy email about the math of this. I think it was part of what I sent to the commission. And people before I was here picked this lot to satisfy those requirements. So the math was already had already happened. So we found out about this while working on closing out Couch from last April. So it was housekeeping, that's why it says housekeeping. One last pitch on this would be the Article 97 allows the housekeeping, but this conversation also broadens the overall awareness of the commission and the capacity for Article 97, or just putting a conservation restriction on it, or putting a conservation restriction with a third party. And let's think about all the third parties we want. Wilderness Trust does a great job, same with Mass Audubon, same with trustees of reservations, they're all good, you know? And they all have their place, and that's all I'm trying to say.
So back to Susan's point, Attorney Galvin, is there a mechanism whereby we could vote on this tonight to transfer to the Conservation Commission, but leave pending whether it would be Article 97 or a third-party CR?
So I'm listening to the discussion, and it sounds to me like the commission believes that it is going to decide whether this happens or not happens. That's not what you're voting for, okay? There's an article on the town meeting warrant, sponsored either by, and I don't have the warrant in front of me, and I apologize if that's in the other room. Either offered by the Board of Public Works or the Selectmen, to transfer this land to the care and custody of the Conservation Commission with some very specific language that invokes very specifically the Article 97 protections for this land, okay? It's already been decided by two boards to bring this to town meeting and get town meeting approval. I think what you're doing tonight is expressing a preference for whether this happens again in the future or in another circumstance, and ultimately someone might want to know what the commission thought about this article at town meeting, and if you have a sense of what you know, by a majority of the commission as to what you feel about it, I think you could give that at town meeting, but you're not approving or rejecting the article, only town meeting can do that, okay? It's on the warrant already to decide. So, I mean, I'm happy to talk to you about the alternate ways to protect property. I happen to agree with a lot of the discussion. I like conservation restrictions. I'm, as Bill alluded to, I'm counsel in other towns, and we use conservation restrictions, and we've used them here multiple times in Marshfield. You know, there are not many entities that hold these restrictions. They're really specialized environmental organizations that have to meet certain standards in order to be eligible to even hold these restrictions. Audubon has done some, but Audubon is chiefly concerned with properties that abut other Audubon property, and probably would be less likely to be interested in a property that was isolated from Audubon property. The Wildlands Trust is more amenable to being located in other areas that are not necessarily contiguous to other Wildlands Trust properties. And we have the trustees of reservations. They, you know, I at least like to think that they're interested in iconic properties that have, you know, a very large acreage or some other significance. And I think they try to bring the public onto those properties whenever they can. And I think the Wildlands Trust does as well, and so does Audubon. But for those of you that know enough about the Audubon also has a rule that you're not allowed to bring your dog with you when you come on Audubon land. So they all have their idiosyncrasies, but there's not a lot of organizations that are willing to do this. You know, I don't view it as one is better than another. They're all intended to be perpetual. And Article 97, just so you know, is an amendment to the Massachusetts Constitution that expresses a constitutional goal of the Commonwealth in preserving and protecting land that's acquired for open space, conservation, water resource protection. And as a result, it's an extremely high bar, met very infrequently. And just to recount what it takes to, it's very easy for land to become Article 97. All you have to do is acquire it with any of those purposes in mind. It's extremely difficult and rarely ever approved to take land out of Article 97. And it requires, just so you remember, a unanimous vote of the Conservation Commission. Okay, it requires a 2/3 vote of town meeting. It requires a 9/10 vote of the state legislature, and it requires the support of the Secretary of Energy and Environmental Affairs, who has an extensive policy, which frankly has a presumption against approving any removal of land from Article 97 proposition. So it is probably for that reason that Natural Heritage, I guess, accepted this idea as an alternative means of protection for this land. I am familiar with removing Article 97 land from Article 97, and it happened in one circumstance that I know of purposefully, and one located in another community less purposefully. The one that I know of that was all done with a very transparent and purposeful result was in Norwell. If you're familiar with where the Norwell Police and Fire Station are, there was an existing newly constructed fire station on a parcel of land on Washington Street across the street from the Fours Restaurant. The town felt that it was in the best interest of the town, given the condition of the police station, to build a new police station, and wanted to have it centrally located at a location on Washington Street, which is also Route 53, and needed a small sliver of land that was under the control of the elected Board of Water Commissioners in order to have enough room to add that police station on. And what the town did in that particular circumstance in order to gain approval was went to the Conservation Commission, went to the Board of Water Commissioners, who also had to take a vote on it, went to the town at town meeting, and substituted probably 10 times the amount of land for which it was, and I'm not giving you an inaccurate number, but it was multiples more amount of land for the land that came out, and it had equal or better water resource protection purposes. And with all of that in mind, the legislature voted in favor of it. It met the criteria established by the secretary to have that land removed, and then it was transferred, and the additional land became water resource protection land. This circumstance also happened over in Situate, where their public safety building was located. I wasn't involved in this, so if I get it wrong, I'm telling you anecdotally what I heard. When that public safety building went in there, apparently it was located on land that had been acquired for open space or conservation protection, or at least a portion of it. Apparently that was not as well known as it should have been. The building got approved, the building got funded, the building got constructed, and then it became apparent that some of this land was Article 97 land. And after the fact, I think the town had a lot of work to do in order to convince the appropriate authorities that it could come up with enough compensatory land to account for what they did. But, you know, I'm sure that was a nervous day or nervous time in Situate, because that was done in violation of a constitutional amendment, and, you know, then the Attorney General's office is involved, and I'm sure they had to make great strides to do it. So I look at them not as one is better than the other, they're different, okay, with different foundation. One is statutory, the conservation restrictions are statutory under Chapter 184. Article 97 actually is a higher level of authority because it's a constitutional amendment expressing the desire to protect these types of lands. Is it possible to get rid of a conservation restriction? It is possible to get rid of a conservation restriction, but you also need the consensus of the holder of the restriction, and I think that they'd probably be hard pressed to give up any. I think that those organizations that we've talked about tonight would probably be unlikely to grant that request and require something very extraordinary to occur to agree to that. And they would have to agree to it, and no one could compel them to agree to it. So they're different, but nothing is an absolute certainty.
So, Bob, on the conservation restriction that you're talking about, there's two species. There's one with a third party, as we talked about.
Before we go there, Bill, could I ask Attorney Galvin a question? Because am I correct in understanding that our discussion of using a third-party conservation restriction on this property is moot with respect to the article before town meeting?
You cut out at the very beginning, Ms. Hannafin, so I couldn't hear the beginning of your question.
Am I correct in understanding that our discussion of trying to decide whether this is Article 97 or a third-party conservation restriction is moot because it's already been accepted under Article 90, it's on the warrant under Article 97?
Yeah, well, my understanding is, of the situation right now is that, that Natural Heritage wants this land transferred to the town to be held by the Conservation Commission with some very specific language added to a transfer document. And if, in fact, that language is added and the land ends up with the commission subject to that language, they're satisfied. So that's my understanding of the circumstances.
Okay. I'm not trying to satisfy Natural Heritage. I'm trying to satisfy us.
Yeah, yep.
Um,
Well, I did look at the article as a Board of Public Works article.
Attorney
So,
Galvin,
I mean, if the commission is saying that they wanted this vetted out differently, again, this is a housekeeping item. I guess I faded, low battery, okay.
What's the time-sensitive nature of this?
If the commission wishes to take a vote to support the article or not support the article, all you have to do is take a vote before the town meeting, and if you're asked what your opinion is, you can give it. But literally, that's what I understood this was on the agenda for, whether you want to support the article or not support the article.
Table it.
I think that's pretty right, and I know if we misstepped in some way, it's a housekeeping item. It came up again, just for full disclosure, while we were doing the closure of the Couch Beach, which was voted on unanimously last year in Article 97. So 68 acres was put under Conservation Article 97. That's a pretty prime property. That was appropriate, and that came about when we became aware of it when the chief of regulatory review at Natural Heritage said that you could have the third-party conservation restriction or a Article 97 deed restricted with the specific language Bob's talking about, which has been provided. Either one works, so it's 50-50 from their perspective, and they want mitigation for rare species. So we're all talking about what the commission thinks is the highest bar. Town council's provided that also, but Natural Heritage said those two are equal in their eyes, so keep that in mind.
Do you have a question, Joe? Or a comment?
2 questions. What are the consequences for not passing this at town meeting?
Oh, then, it would come back again, and they have, at some point, 25 acres needs to be set aside for, let me figure it out again. Basically, the partial completion, which remains of the ball fields on Rockwood Road, and then the Boys and Girls Club. Those remain unfulfilled. And my understanding from what the verbal we had was that Phase 2 is connected to that. So eventually those cemetery lots need to be built and so on, but because this has been going on a while, it's like our conditions. We want the mitigation for the plantings. What do? Eric and I go out and follow up on it. We come back to the commission. We've had tons of problems with subdivisions. You've seen it. So we've got to do something to make that go forward and get it fulfilled. And basically they're politely saying we like to, this is a way we can close it out. So
we can't continue with those projects until this is done.
well, that's my understanding. But again, like with replication, mitigation, et cetera, I think with enforcement, I was taught even back in California and recently, you need to have a record before you go to the full enforcement because the judge will throw it out often. So you need to be kind and polite about it, and it's an iterative process. So I think they're in the middle of being polite and kind on that end of the spectrum.
Can I ask, Mr. Galvin a question? Is it my understanding of what you're saying is our vote tonight really is inconsequential to the outcome of this, that the outcome is only town meeting, correct? So if we all voted against this because we wanted a CR, it's still going on the warrant, and our vote doesn't have any effect on the outcome. Is that correct?
No, I wouldn't say
Okay,
that.
not any effect.
I
It
would
could,
say-
it could have an
I-
influence.
No, you carry a
but-
lot of weight, unfortunately. You
but-
definitely do.
But I'm
Let me
just
try
want to
to, let me
understand.
try to answer the question, okay?
Sorry.
This article is on the warrant. Town meeting voters will decide whether to support the article or not support the article, and if it passes, it will be implemented. If someone were to ask, how does the Conservation Commission feel about this? Whatever you decide, whether it's tonight or on another night before town meeting, someone, probably Ms. Hannafin, will stand up and say, the commission had a vote on such and such night and said we didn't want to support the article because we'd rather have a conservation restriction. And that's what would happen. And then the town would vote on the article. And, if they didn't support it, then, it'll be up to the Board of Public Works, but, the town will have to do maybe go back to conservation restriction, I don't know. But, again,
That makes it clear, thank
this
you.
is up to the town to decide at this point, and, but the town shouldn't be informed that, what is being proposed here is not acceptable because it's perfectly legal, okay? It's, just alternate ways of doing something, and, I meant it when I said it, I negotiate these things with Natural Heritage, and I negotiate these things with the Wildlife Trust, and I've been involved in the negotiations, although my aspect is more of the negotiation of the language of the restrictions and not the underlying terms and how much the stewardship fees are. I'm a big supporter of these organizations, and I think they do a great job, and I do think that what you've talked about is important. But, we're very fortunate, we have a good conservation commission here that's pretty attuned to its properties, and, we have a good agent that is pretty diligent about finding out, people's problems, so I guess we don't really have a bad problem to begin with, although, I do like the fact that, when there's third-party support, we can get it without using our own resources, I like that, so that's how I think about it.
Thank you, that clarifies it for me.
I've got one more, Bob. Are the two things mutually exclusive? If you do 97, can you not have a third-party CR?
I don't think they're mutually exclusive, Bert. I think that I've seen land that was acquired for open space purposes, then restricted with a conservation restriction. I've seen that done before.
So
I've seen land acquired for historic preservation purposes and a historic preservation restriction placed on it. So, I don't think they're mutually exclusive, but, this is kind of a newer view of land protection. I don't think that this was conventionally thought of as being possible, so this represents a shift. And I don't know why the state took this view, or the Natural Heritage Endangered Species Program took the view they did, but obviously they and their council, which is Council for the Division of Fisheries and Wildlife, feel like it's an adequate protection. And they said it was acceptable, so you have to kind of defer to them in that regard.
Yeah, I think that if monitoring is perhaps our biggest issue, and how do we get the best protection in monitoring?
Okay, so monitoring is only a portion of it. If I was to tell you my evaluation of the monitoring on the site, I could have doubled the amount of stuff they found by blinking my eyes in the locations we went to. So I'm not trying to be critical. I don't need that extra work. This stuff was there when the town decided to take it. All right, I saw mattresses and all kinds of stuff. I guess I'm now gonna have to remove it. So long story short, it's out there. There's also water department stuff out there. Shall I keep going? Nobody told me about that. I was doing the monitoring, and I'm now gonna have to talk to people about it. We came up with a strategy. I had 4 commissioners out in the field. and we came up with a strategy to deal with this, which I think is going to be highly evolved, and other people are going to be like, how do you get this done? Well, get the commission out, get their guidance, follow what matters to them, because they're the power, they're discretionary authority, and then implement it. That's it.
So we're not under a time constraint.
not.
Do we want to do a little more research?
I think-
Yes,
I
that's
think-
my feeling,
We should table
yes.
and dig a little deeper. This is a more complex thing than I think we expected going in.
So let me just put it to you this way also. If you look at the open space properties and you want them all to have CRs with third parties, on average it's between, did you say 28,000? Is that right? Or is that the preparation?
That's, no, 28,000, that's the complete, for both properties.
So we'll
The whole-
divide it in two, just say 15 grand. So I thought it was 10.
13 for one and 14 and
Yeah,
change for
all
the
right,
other.
so I heard 10 on a smaller lot and let's call it
It's
12.
generally 10 on a
12 and a
small
half,
lot.
all right? So 12 and a half times, we've got 2,800, 3,000 acres. If you wanted all those to have CRs, you've got, I don't know, well over 200 properties times 12 and a half. That's what you're saying, or can I?
That wouldn't
No,
be
that's not
appropriate
right.
for
Thank
smaller
God, thank you.
parcels, and
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think we
I
should
agree.
finish
I
this up.
agree. I totally agree.
Right, if you
Yeah,
have to,
that's what we're
that's why I
saying.
think we
Could
should
I
table,
also-
because if we do, if we do have to pick and choose, then I think it is important to have the comparisons, the metrics that says, and we prioritize in some way.
This is good.
If we have to go that way.
Can I get a task force, and is it possible to get a task force on this of commissioners so that we can get all this out? Because if this doesn't go forward, it's okay. I'm just trying to do the job, okay?
Could I say one other thing? Because I think that there's something that you all need to hear. If the town acquires conservation land with CPA funds, the law requires a conservation restriction,
Exactly.
okay? That wasn't this circumstance, okay? So that's why it's even an option to do something different.
And then I just want to clear up one thing. The chair wanted the commissioners to go. Could I speak?
Yes.
Is that okay? So you were talking about removal of conservation restrictions, Bob, about 10 minutes ago? And you said it would probably be very difficult for the third parties when they're associated with them to give you the rights to remove a CR. Well, what happens when a CR is put on with either a private entity or a town department? Water might have a conservation restriction on it. Department of Public Works might have a conservation restriction on it. Isn't that also something that's still difficult to remove, or is it easy to remove in that case?
Are you saying in circumstance where the town is the holder of the rights?
Yeah,
to
right,
those?
and then they drop in a conservation restriction to double down, yes. And I've seen that one.
It doesn't make any sense to me, but I mean, I mean, the Conservation Commission could potentially hold the benefit of a restriction in properties like the Wildlands Trust, like the trustees of reservations.
Yeah.
And the property could be owned by another person or entity, okay? That circumstance could exist. I mean, there's a gentleman that has a 40B development on the Marshfield Duxbury line. He'd very much like you to be the holder of a conservation restriction on some open space land. But we kind of advocate against that because of the burden it places on the commission and its staff. So, look at, I didn't really understand your question because you don't usually hold the restriction and own the land, because the ownership rights would merge with the benefit of the restriction rights as a matter of law to be a nullity, legal nullity. It's like having a mortgage in your own property. You
Yeah,
can't
I've
have a
actually,
mortgage in your own property.
I've seen a few of them, Bob, out there, and so that's why I'm asking that question. If you had DPW with a conservation restriction, which backed up, said these are your prohibitions, these are your permissions, these are your severabilities, et cetera. I've seen a few like that. Could that get severed? Could that also get severed is the question.
Again, the town can't have a restriction in its own land. It can't be the holder of a restriction and the landowner on the same property, because that doesn't work. You always need a third party. I'm not familiar with a single circumstance where the town, where any town owned the land and was the holder of a restriction on the land. That it just doesn't, it would be a legal nullity.
Okay.
So, I mean, I look at it, I hope our Board of Public Works, or whatever entity that in the future holds title to our water resource lands, never gives up any of that land. That would be crazy, because that's such a scarce resource, and we pay so much money to acquire it to begin with. We've taken home houses and we've removed septic systems in zone twos. I can't imagine us ever doing it, and I would hope the commission would take a similar view about any land that we've acquired for conservation purposes. It would take a real set of rare circumstances before we should ever get rid of or loosen up or get rid of any conservation land. I can't imagine us giving it up.
Okay. If the commission does not have more questions or comments?
I'm sorry to add a comment, but to follow up on Art's point, at some point we need to make a financial consideration. Mike Moresco and company are not going to give us an unlimited bank account for third-party rights on the property. So we have to be willing to consider that value. Quite honestly, when I look at this piece of property, it's surrounded by other pieces of property that are Conservation Commission owned, that don't have third party, that don't have restrictions. And we want to put one on an isolated piece of property when we have plenty of other spaces that we really do want to. And I don't disagree with any of the comments I've heard from anyone tonight, but we have to be fiscally responsible as well. And I just don't see another option in this particular case. To be quite honest, having listened to all of you, and I've really enjoyed working with you and completely side with you on all of your comments, this one, I just don't see the value.
And we have to prioritize.
So,
We have to
So,
prioritize.
to Joe's point, I'm gonna pass this around so you can see it. I made a mess of this, you know my
thought we were
handwriting.
done.
But
Yeah.
it shows you the property.
There was no
I
comment.
thought we were ready to table this and.
Yeah,
I'm just
I'm-
joining into
think-
Joe's comments, that's all. I'm not trying to interfere with your
get the
decision.
numbers will be.
Yep, no, thank you, Joe. I agree. I agree with that comment, but because of everything that's come out of this discussion, I am going to move that we table this. May I have a second?
Second.
Second, Art. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
600, okay.
No, not 600.
Oh, okay, so you have to say all in favor, all nay.
All opposed?
Okay, we got Joe, okay, 5-1, and no abstaining. Okay, very good. 5,
Because I agree with everybody else.
okay.
All right. Thank you, Town Council, for your assistance there.
This is it.
No problem.
All right,
Surrounded by
item
others.
B4, ancillary structure activities and conservation building requirements.
Properties that could use
Eric,
more
why don't you
protection.
run with that? I only have one thing to say to you, is maybe the hardening thing that we talked, but that's AOs and VEs only, right? So just bring it up, I think.
Sure.
Agent Flint?
So let me just share my screen quickly here. We had a conversation with the building department recently regarding the upcoming floodplain permit and some of the structures that are gonna be brought to our attention because of it. One thing we've seen frequently so far is generator stands. They're typically in land subject to coastal storm flowage or barrier beach areas that would require conservation permitting. And one of the outcomes of that discussion was trying to figure out a way to streamline the permitting process with conservation so that we could have a tandem effort with the building department and also provide the residents with clarity on how they can proceed with installing these generator stands. And the main purpose of doing this is to make it so that they're installed in a FEMA compliant way to prevent storm damage when large storms occur, and it can take out generators and they can cause damage and pollution. And the idea here is really just to come up with a way to make this as unburdensome as possible on everyone involved to make sure that things are done correctly. So we came up with a draft proposal of how to handle these types of things, different methods of installing in different resource areas. You can see the table in front of you here. basically proposing de minimis activities for generator stand installation in land subject to coastal storm flowage only, and then increasing to conservation permits for certain types of stands in land subject to coastal storm flowage that also overlaps with another wetland resource area, such as Barrier Beach, Riverfront, buffer zone to another resource area. Our conversation with Andrew kind of implied that Diamond Piers would be a very strong supporting footing for these stands, and I know typically here we have considered that to be a less intrusive type of footing when we examine projects. So that was the logic for considering that a de minimis activity if we're looking at resource areas in conjunction with land subject to coastal storm flowage. We also discussed sheds briefly, and this is a relatively more simple table because it's pretty much needs a conservation permit unless you're replacing a shed within the existing footprint, only within land subject to coastal storm flowage. So we wanted to bring this in front of the commission, try and streamline this going forward as the floodplain permit introduces more of these structures to our attention. So I guess I would open up, and I would, put this with the caveat that we would have our normal special conditions, that we would have subject to change if we get performance standards issued by DEP for land subject to coastal storm flowage, and that this would only apply to sites that are previously disturbed and not undisturbed sites.
Good, I like it.
Good.
Yeah.
Very good.
Nice work.
Looks good to me. Everybody in agreement?
Yep.
The hardening topic? The hardening topic for AO and VE?
The hardening topic? Yeah,
So-
but that's a somewhat unrelated one to this one.
So, anything that you do, in an AO or a VE that alters could be considered hardening, okay? And then some of the other elements come up, even like gravel driveways. So I just wanted you to be aware of it. If there's something esoteric that appears later on, this is pretty good. I feel like it's pretty airtight. Eric and I punched it to pieces, and it's where it needs to be. However, with the evolving regs, the hardening topic may come up, and I just want to throw it out there. It may need another round. This is a great first edition.
I think just a note in general, as the floodplain permit evolves, I think we may need to just continually look at the way we permit things. So I think that could be looked at as an ongoing thing that we're working on, but this could be a good step forward in streamlining what we're doing.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, I quite agree. So unless anyone has further discussion, I move that we vote to implement the draft of the ancillary structures and coastal flood zones document as policy to guide the conservation permitting process for these structures. May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Could I also throw it out there that we update the policy guide at the same time, so this can be put in there and become a
Yep.
living document? So,
And it will be added to the,
okay.
policy and procedures guide.
Okay.
All right. Item B5 is concerning 98 Cherry Street and the possibility of a land use license. We have Attorney Brodsky and do we have Attorney Galvin? We have a property that is, it dates to 1900, which has subsequently ended up slightly on what has become conservation land. So the issue of the possibility of a land use license has been raised. Mr. Galvin and Mr. Brodsky, would you like to amplify on this?
I'll jump in. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
Bob.
Okay, I thought I heard an echo, so I wanted to make sure. So the fact that there'd be an encroachment on town land is not a new circumstance to the town. We have it in a variety of locations. When it's non-conservation land, it's significantly easier to address. When it is on conservation land, we have a potential for enforcement. Let me give you an example. The Levitate building in downtown Marshfield. It was built into the layout of the state numbered Route 139. It's a slight encroachment, but a corner of the building juts into the unimproved portion of the roadway. The owner of the property came to us and asked if they could leave the building where it is. In the event that the building is ever renovated, they'll remove the building from the layout of the way, and they were granted a license after a public discussion with the select. That's just one. We've had others. Maybe sometimes to allow someone to build a handicap ramp where there's a topography issue. But chiefly they involve general town-owned property and not conservation land. We've had other circumstances that I won't go into detail about where someone built a building over the lot line into land that's conservation land, and we've threatened enforcement action and fortunately gained compliance by persistent threats of enforcement. And then we have this circumstance here. And admittedly, I don't have all the facts, and I don't know that we're gonna flush them all out in an open meeting because of the possibility of things could get contentious, but apparently this house at the end of Cherry Street has been there for some time. Apparently it's been determined to encroach slightly on land that's under the care and custody of the Conservation Commission and has been for a significant period of time. My understanding is the property recently changed hands, and before it changed hands, there was the idea that the encroachment, which is a slight encroachment, would be remedied. Apparently the current owner wishes to explore the possibility of doing something different. I can't recall a single circumstance in my years as town council and in my prior years where the town ever conveyed an easement or deeded conservation land to solve an encroachment issue to somebody, but that doesn't mean it didn't ever happen. There always exists the possibility that someone would make a claim that they've acquired some ownership rights, although those ownership rights have to basically perceive the town's acquisition of the land and as open space or conservation land, and there's a very rigorous test that has to be met, and I'm not sure whether this could qualify. Far too many facts that wouldn't be known. So this might be a particular property, if some of those facts were true, that it might make sense to allow on a permissive basis, and given the de minimis nature of the encroachment, a permissive right to allow the structure, which has been there for a very long time, I don't know how long, to continue to exist with some conditions. And those conditions which we would normally propose for any license, but would be more appropriate even in this circumstance, would be if the applicant ever had to engage in any type of substantial renovation of the structure would be removed from its encroaching position and placed wholly within the lot. The owner of the property would have to provide us insurance. The owner of the property would have to indemnify and hold us harmless in the event anybody was injured on the in or on a portion of the structure that encroached. The owner would have to indemnify us for any type of environmental consequence as a result of the maintenance of this. And it would probably be a very, very stringent permissive license that the town could revoke if there was a violation of any of these conditions and compel removal. And that's about as strict as you could ever be with permission. It's stricter than we are on some of the other properties where we allow an encroachment, but this is environmental property too. So this is a very rare and unusual circumstance, where I think we could, with the commission's support, see some set of facts that might justify that type of an agreement with this property owner. But again, this is your call, not my call, okay? If we can legally do it, I guess I'm telling you we can legally do it, and I'm telling you the conditions under which I think it would be appropriate to consider granting that permission. But again, that's up to you to decide. I always hear the argument that if you do something here, you have to do it for the next person or the next set of properties. I don't subscribe to the slippery slope theory of lawyering or legal matters. I look at every circumstance as being distinct, and although there are similarities and fact patterns, there's hardly ever the identically same project or circumstance. And this one does seem to be a very rare and unusual circumstance. And if you decided to do it, you're evaluating the equitable nature of what's occurred here, and if you need more facts from the property owner, I think you should get every fact that you think you need to know. But I think it's a possibility if you're willing to grant that discretion. What is the alternative? I think you'd probably hear from Attorney Brodsky that the alternative is we could have a fight about it. Maybe he'll win, and maybe he won't. But neither he nor I could tell you that circumstance, and it would ultimately be up to a judge or a jury to decide if that was the case. So I always look to be practical about things. If this was a material encroachment of 10 feet or more, I might think very, very differently about this. If the applicant or his predecessors entitled went out and extended this, knowing that this was a problem, I'd probably think very differently about this. If the circumstance hasn't changed much in the last 50 years, I think that's something you'd want to know. That's how I look at this circumstance. It's an interesting area, Cherry Street. I, just in the context of the last month, been looking at how the town acquired that land, how the land evolved into the town pier, how the land evolved into the dredge spoils area. I knew the ancient history of the property from the Wrexham Beach case, but didn't know the specifics on how the town actually acquired this area and from whence it came. But I've seen how it was acquired. It was acquired by an order of taking. And I forgot it was either the 20s or the 40s. So Cherry Street existed at that time. So it was an ancient subdivision, preceded the subdivision control law, which came into effect in the 1950s. I just don't know how long that house has been in that spot for that long. And if the property owner is willing to meet those very stringent conditions, then perhaps we have something to discuss with them. If they're not, then maybe we have nothing to discuss.
Thank you.
How significant is the encroachment of the building onto the land?
It's very, very small, is it?
It's not just that, there's
They
a,
have a parking area too that they have established. The house is maybe a foot over the line.
I would say it's about 75 square feet to 80, and then you have a parking area that, I don't know, what do you think it is, like 12 feet by 12 feet, something like that, it's hardened. They had a washing area, they removed that. They were mowing Concom land, they took back 50% under our guidance. We weren't really
That
touching
brick
this thing, and then
patio area
it's
out.
blown up, that's all. I think it was mentioned early in the whole conversation, and then we're here on this, and I don't actually know why. So this was.
I always thought that this house is only a small sliver of the structure itself is into the town property.
Yeah, about 75 to 80 square feet, something like that. And then the parking is about 144 square feet. They removed a small, what do you think, 8 by 8, something like that, like laundry area. So they've done some restoration already, and we acknowledge that.
The Cherry Street you can always park in the layout of the street. It may not be optimum, but, you know, there's no need to be parking on conservation land.
Arthur?
I just have a question. I was one that had to go out, some commissioners went out to observe some cutting, some recent cutting. And now we're in this land use situation. How did we get here?
What happened? Well, I don't know about the cutting. What occurred with the cutting?
It was a bunch of illegal cutting, and that's what several of us went out to, were asked to go out and take a look at it.
We looked at the cutting, and Attorney Brodsky was present representing the Gibbs. And during that visit, the topic of an easement or a land use license apparently came up. I did not hear it.
I didn't.
No, but
I was
it was
surprised.
raised, and here we are.
Right.
Ms. Hannigan, this is Adam Brodsky. Would it be appropriate to fill in some of the blanks?
Please do.
Thank you. Yes, there were some wetland enforcement concerns we met on site, and during the course of that, we reviewed some plans, and it was when we looked at the plans that we noticed the encroachment of the existing house. I've been authorized by my clients to do the research to answer some of the questions raised by Mr. Galvin. I have reason to believe that the house has been in that location for decades, and in fact, prior to the Conservation Commission's acquisition of the property, but we need the complete title to confirm that. My clients want to resolve the issue if possible. They are not looking for a fight with the town. A license would be a poor substitute to an easement, and so I just want to make that clear, but they haven't ruled anything out. And if the commission wants us to explore a license with Mr. Galvin, we're happy to do so. I don't know whether we can satisfy some of the conditions that he's articulated. For example, I'm not sure how we would get insurance for an encroachment on land that we don't own, but we're happy to explore that. So again, we're just looking for a sense from the commission, and given that sense, I'll work with Mr. Galvin to try and resolve this. And I should note that the wetlands issues have all been resolved, Mr. Galvin. So the only thing outstanding, as far as I understand, is this, is the encroachment.
So I have a question. In the event that this land use license were to come about, would that go forward with the property through a change of ownership?
A license can be made personal to the person that's granted the permission, or it can be made transferable with the approval of the commission.
Anyone have any thoughts they want to express?
My feeling would be we could move forward with the license of the structure, but with the absolute minimum amount of land included. The parking, that should go away. Anything else, you know, I don't know what would be reasonable, 5 feet out from the house so that they can safely maintain it. I'd be open to suggestion on that, but I think given the age of the house and given Concom's ownership of the land, that's the direction I would tend to go in.
Seems reasonable. The issue of transferability, I would be looking for, Bob, your advice on that.
I mean, my 2 cents is that at some point this house is gonna require, I mean, it could be, it could suffer some flooding and be damaged in a casualty type event. Or at some point the house might just need to be renovated. And I think that, like we have to do when you have to elevate a property, when you reach a certain threshold, it probably makes sense financially to remove the encroachment. And I think if we would have a casualty here, or they had to renovate the house over a certain dollar amount of money, we would want them to then remove the encroachment, and then that would solve it for everybody's purposes.
Yeah, I believe the previous owner's orders of condition, which apparently were never recorded, specified that in the event of any substantive renovation, the house would be moved off of Concom land.
Ms. Hannigan, this is Adam Brodsky. I believe that they received an order of conditions to improve the house, but also to relocate it. I don't think that was a condition. The site plans that I saw actually relocated the house on the lot. As you know, my clients have no interest in doing that project and have no obligation to do so. I would point out with respect to the parking, I've seen some historic aerial photographs that show that the parking area also being used for decades. So I just want to let you know that that's a concern for my clients.
Well, I agree with Commissioner O'Donnell's remark. If Attorney Galvin and Attorney Brodsky can come to some sort of agreement on what the terms of a license would be, and I think everyone here is probably looking for a pretty strict set of terms regarding the encroachment of the house, and I would be in agreement that the parking area should not be included. I don't know how
I
other
agree.
people feel. Arthur agrees.
Yeah, I agree.
I agree.
Yeah.
So, you know, going forward, I still don't think we're in a position to vote to either approve or deny the issuance of a land use license until we have a clearer understanding of what the terms of that licensing would be.
Well,
So,
then let me make a suggestion that you give me some authority to discuss some terms with Attorney Brodsky, and we'll get as far as we can, and then I'll bring it back to you with what they'll agree to, and then we'll decide whether it's good enough.
that is satisfactory to me.
Sounds good.
Does everyone agree?
Yep.
All right, then I move that we table this pending discussion between the attorneys and clearer guidance on what a land use license would entail in this instance.
Does that work for Bob, or does he want a vote telling
Do
him
you
to go
want, do you want
forward?
a vote? Telling,
I mean, look, if, you don't have to take a formal vote, but if I have the sense of the commission that I can have these discussions with Attorney Brodsky, I mean, Attorney Brodsky and I have been on the same side of matters, we've been on the opposite side of matters. We've tried matters in Marshfield, not too far away from this property, on opposite sides. He's easy to speak to, we speak the same language. We'll do the very best we can to come up with something that I think protects our interests, and he'll do something that protects his client's interest, and we'll see if we can do something that we can both recommend to the commission and Mr. Gibbs.
I mean, we can certainly take a vote just to keep it neat and tidy. I would move that we vote to give Mr. Galvin discretion to negotiate with Mr. Brodsky and come back to us with clearer terms.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
A date certain? Because otherwise it's gonna keep going.
No, I'm gonna draft one immediately and send it to Attorney Brodsky, and then we're gonna have these discussions, and I'll keep Mr. Grafton and Ms. Hannafin apprised of our discussions and copy them on it, and when we've got something to come back, we're gonna get this done. You'll have something to vote on.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you, good night.
Good night. And that concludes the business portion of the evening.
6:00, is it 6:01 then?
Yes.
Okay.
We have one scheduled continuation, which is 62 Marginal Road, the Lawson Dock System, that has been continued until the October 5th public meeting. So now we are into the public meeting portion. First up is 16 Joyce Street, which is the replacement of deck and hardscaping. This is this new? Didn't we open this?
It's continued.
Yeah, it's
It's continued, yes. So I don't need to read the legal ad, and Commissioner Carberry is the hearing officer.
Okay. Thank you. All right. So this is an RDA, as we said, continued from September 7th. The project involves removal of 286 square feet of deck and replacing it with hardscape, permeable pavers, and some stone, as well as building some other decks, steps, and landings, approximately 166 square feet, in a previously disturbed area. And I think at the last hearing, we'd asked for an updated plan that documented the correct firm, floodplain A03, partially in a VE zone 19. And we asked for some cross-sectional diagrams of the hardened surfaces, so we had a better understanding as to the permeability. And there was some discussion about plants, planting plan, and I think on September 13th, a new revised plan was sent to us for review. So does somebody want to take us through that? Who's going to represent the project?
Hi, well, good evening, members of the commission. Brad Holmes with ECR.
Hi, Brad.
Very well put. A summary of the meeting that we had 2 weeks ago. I think the plan that we've submitted here that has been presented depicts what we were discussing with the commission, which was to better clarify the project, to define the flood zone, which we have, to update that change from FEMA, and to provide the commission some more detail on what the hardscape would be. That may have been a term that may have thrown the commission off, but we were basically using that term for a kind of a generalized term for the removal of the existing deck area and replacement with pervious patios and or gravel or stone. That stone is to be gravel. So what we've done is we've clarified and depicted the area where the pavers will be with a cross-section of a typical paver design, and we've clarified the area where the stone will be located. And we've also updated the plan to show that the entire site is in the A03 zone. There is a velocity zone off to the east, which the project doesn't occur within. But overall, we've been able to clarify the work. There is small areas of deck addition, as you can see, with some landings, and the removal of the deck with the pervious patio and stone. And overall, this would remove more structure on the site to allow a better use for the applicant and hopefully a better improvement in land septic coastal storm flowage. So I won't go on further. I think that this accomplishes what the commission was looking for, and I'll take any questions you have.
Thank you, Brad. And the overall amount of impervious square footage is going to be reduced somewhat, correct?
Correct.
Okay. What happens to all the beautiful plants that are there right now and the planting beds? Are those still going to surround the newly reconstructed paver area and stone areas?
Yes.
Okay.
Correct, because we're not going outside the footprint of the existing deck. Those plantings will remain. The D'Adarios take great pride in their property, as you can see.
Yep.
And they'll be adding, additional plantings here or there. But we're not impacting the existing planting beds that are there.
Okay, good. Very, very good. I guess for the benefit of the commission, one of the considerations, and thank you for addressing all those asks that we had during the last meeting, but I think for the commission, one of the issues that we need to struggle with here is, standards for barrier beach and dune performance standards apply in this case. And Chapter 505 in AO and VE flood zones talks about considering, all hardened surfaces, which even include walkways, stone driveways, and all that sort of thing, as impervious surfaces not to exceed 500 square feet. And I think that is something that we need to wrestle with, because I'm not so sure that many properties that have driveways at all are going to, meet this very rigorous standard. The other corroborating information here, to my view, is that at the business meeting, March 21st, we had advised the D'Addarios that an RDA was the right approach. They came to us in a business meeting format to talk about the project, what they wanted to do, looking for guidance, and the guidance we gave them was this is suitable for an RDA. And this work is really in a previously disturbed area. And when I look at that cross-section of the permeable pavers, even though the Chapter 505 considers that a hardened impervious surface, that looks to me like it's going to drain. And so those are the issues I think we have, in framing this up. Do you guys and gals have any comments or
I think
questions about
you did
that?
a very good job. I'm thinking along the same lines. I should mention, or someone should mention, that I signed a Mullen affidavit on this. I watched your last
My last half an hour?
meeting. It was exactly about a half hour. That's right. It was a half hour
Okay.
out of a 4-hour meeting.
Thank you, Art.
No, I think it was well put, right?
Okay.
I think,
Well, I think
our regs, they're evolving, and we intended to go back and look at these again. One of the things to mention, the AO zone increased greatly with the new FEMA maps.
Yeah.
So that isn't something that we had a tremendous amount of in town
Yeah.
up until now.
That's right.
Now it's increased greatly, so.
Yeah.
And embedded in the revised regs, that's something that has to be looked at pretty carefully.
Yeah. I mean, Eric and Bill, other comments from the agents?
No, I'm gonna say that it's well written up here. I think the commission's got a good grasp on this. You've asked for all the right criteria to make a decision. I think you can go ahead. Plantings were one thing. I think you're where you are, I think it's not fair to put the 500 on them as the test bed, but I think the commission needs to continue to evolve this. They're showing a 0% change overall. Do you start here or start somewhere else? Maybe the 500 is going to be expanded by December. We're looking at revisions with other departments that are going to be submitting. I think the chair has got the first round of those recently, but I don't think the attachments came through from having looked at them yet.
Not
Yeah, I have to get those. So we're starting to get some feedback on the regs already.
Okay. Any other comments, questions from the commissioners? No? We all good? I just don't feel like it's the right thing to do to go back and request an NOI and an engineering drawing and the time delays and
seems a bit,
expense. It seems
punitive, since we've
seems
already
punitive
told
and
them one
and
thing.
over the top.
Yeah.
You folks
see what we
have
do.
done what we've asked, and I think it looks good. So that leaves us with the public. Any comments, questions from the public on the Zoom call or in the room? No? Everybody good? Okay. Then, I'd like to close the hearing with special conditions and with a positive determination number 5 for the bylaw and a negative determination number 2. Can I get a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Eric, Bill, you want to read the special conditions?
Yeah, just standard special conditions on this one would be ensure best management practices, NFIP, FEMA regulations, and building codes are followed, obtain all subsequent permits, and see the conservation administrator or agent for guidance on conservation permits for work beyond the approved work activities.
Excellent.
Who's your
Excellent.
second there, Rick? Joe was.
Joe?
Yep. So,
Jim and Sue Daddario, you've got a beautiful property. It's going to look even better when you get done. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Appreciate your help.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brad.
Members, good night.
Night.
Thanks, Brad.
Okay.
There's only one other one.
Pardon me?
There's only one other one.
There's only one other one.
I
yeah.
know.
Imagine that.
I'm not used to this.
Don't speak too soon.
Yeah.
I was gonna say that until the end.
Okay.
What about that conservation land?
We are on now to 12 Edward Road. This is a new hearing. I will read the legal ad. In compliance with the code of the town of Marshfield, Chapter 294, Wetlands Protection, a public hearing will be held by the Marshfield Conservation Commission on Tuesday, September 21st, 2021 at 6:30 p.m. To consider an after-the-fact notice of intent filed by Brian and Casey Rhodes, 12 Edward Road, Marshfield, for the construction of an addition to a single-family home, paved parking area, and paver walkway within the buffer zone to an isolated vegetated wetlands at 12 Edward Road. And the hearing officer is Commissioner Karen.
Eric, could you confirm the administrative requirements, taxes, fees, and a butter notification within 7 days?
Yeah, so that's confirmed. I would note that we did receive a claim that at least one abutter was not notified, but we did receive all the required confirmations of mailings that we need to proceed with this.
Okay, great.
So just for the record, I think it meets the town bylaw requirements. This is town bylaw only,
Understand.
and I think there's no question about that.
So, as Craig pointed out, this is a after-the-fact filing for previously constructed walkway, parking area, and the initiation of an addition on the western part of the property. The jurisdictions are 100 feet, activities are within 100 feet of the buffer zone to 2 isolated vegetated wetlands. There are no natural heritage endangered species identifications and not in a floodplain. And I see John Zimmer on the call. John, you're representing?
Yes, I am. Thank you. Good evening, John Zimmer, South River Environmental, on behalf of the Roads. If you remember at the last hearing, we came in with a request for a de minimis activity for the proposed addition, and the commission requested that we file a notice of intent for the project. This is kind of a unique situation where the building department actually issued a building permit without the conservation approval. I believe that they looked at the GIS layers and it didn't show that there were wetlands within the area. So as soon as the Roads found out that there were indeed wetlands there, they contacted me. I went into the field and delineated 2 isolated wetlands within and adjacent to the property, which are shown on the site plan. And then Bob Crawford with EET came out and did an existing conditions survey and showed the proposed addition location. And you can see on the site plan that the addition is well outside of the 25-foot buffer zone. You can see that there are silt sock that was put in, as soon as we had the discussion at the last hearing. Mr. Rhodes went out and put the erosion controls in to, even though there's no material that's getting back to the wetland, just to further protect it. So what we're here tonight is for the proposed addition, to have that reviewed, as well as some activities that occurred without conservation approval, including the walkway and the expansion of the parking area, to the 2-car garage. And you'll also see in the bottom of the drawing that there was a small area that was historically gravel that was paved over for additional parking. And we're proposing to remove that pavement from the 25-foot buffer so that there's no additional activity within that. So that will be removed from any future parking for the property. And also to ensure that there's no future encroachment in the buffer, we've added in conservation markers, a few feet off of the edge of the existing lawn. And I think there's 4 of those total, so that it's very clear that there is a wetland back there, and any future work for successive, for Mr. Rhodes and for any successive property owners, would need to come in front of conservation for approval. As you're aware, that the addition is under construction now because the building permit was issued, but work is stopped on that until we can get through the process with you folks, and hopefully we can get an order of conditions issued for it and move it forward. But that's about it in a nutshell. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Do you have any further comments, Eric, on this?
Sure. So I guess just to summarize our involvement in this, Bill and I responded to, I think we received three complaints about this property regarding work near wetlands. We visited this site on August 27th. We took a look in that neighboring vacant lot and identified a large predominance of wetland indicator plants, and that was when Bill initiated conversations with Mr. Rhodes that additional permitting would be needed. As John mentioned, this was brought up last meeting, and a de minimis was denied as the work was a bit too large in scope. So I think, as John mentioned, the proposed addition, or the addition, is outside of the 25, and since this lot was developed prior to 2002, that would comply with the 505 regs for going within the 50. Developed prior to 2002. We did note that there were a few areas of pea stone. Actually, they're called out on this site plan you can see here. Existing pea stone in a couple locations that's piled up along the edge of the lawn and also into the wetland. I think the commission could consider asking that be removed, since it could be considered a fill and it is right up on the wetland. I think that we're getting some good corrective action with the removal of the portion of concrete that's within the 25 that would not really be permittable. And I think that the conservation posts seem to be a good step to maintaining this wetland for the future.
I'd like to
Aside from that, I don't really have anything additional on this one.
Commissioner Karen, Eric, did you mention the board that's blocking the flow between the two wetlands?
There is one board. I can actually pull up a picture, I think.
Board?
I didn't see
Yeah,
that.
Like
it-
a
there's
wooden board stuck in
it's
the
like a
ground.
dam, and it creates flooding problems, and
Where is
Eric's
this?
Eric's gonna show you, it's
Okay.
clearly there, down by that picture you saw when we were talking about the complaint on 313 Carswell.
Somebody replaced it with a larger board.
And you guys can't talk
Maybe beavers. Sorry.
Yeah, that's not the best angle.
So,
But basically, you can see that there's two pieces of wood back in there in the back behind the pea stone.
So there's two wetlands. You have like your B flags behind the garbage can, and then to the right side of where the board is, that's where the Rubo shed was, and you can see the shrubs in the back and the plant they dropped that had the wetland flag on it. So this creates some friction. This hardscape that Eric was talking about is in 3 locations. It's creating a little bit of flooding. If it's natural, and it won't create as much flooding on other neighbors. It's not a lot, but it's causing some. And then Eric was talking about the paved area, and they're willing to remove that, and those are all contributing to some of the floods. And then naturally, trees have fallen down. That was part of the complaint. We investigated that thoroughly. I made Eric and I get in there. One got snapped high, and another fell as a root, and those trees are sort of blocking flooding also. So, water that flows through. So that's contributing naturally in such the same way that board there is contributing. So the man-made things can come out, human-made things, I should say, and conservation markers, and then we've also advised them to help us out with any neighbors that are dumping on this lot that Rhodes doesn't own and Rubo doesn't own, So all those things were conveyed. Good messaging has happened here, and people are starting to understand.
Those
Yeah,
are the,
and I did speak with Mr. Rhodes prior to the hearing, and he is definitely amenable to removing the pea stone and the board that's out there.
And the driveway.
Yes, yeah.
And then I assume in letting those areas revegetate, there'll be no filling of that once the stone is removed, correct?
Correct.
Unless a new permit is allowed by the commission.
was the stone put there to absorb water, or?
No, to park his trailer.
We-
I have pictures of it.
Just control it, guys. Kara should.
Park the trailer. Park a
Okay,
boat or a
wait,
trailer?
wait,
Hold on, we need to get their
Excuse me.
names.
Point of order,
Point of order.
We
Yes.
have to let the commission finish, and
Then we'll take your
then we will
questions.
take your
Yeah,
comments.
exactly.
Oh, he was looking at us.
Wait,
It's my fault.
Okay.
He does that to a lot of
I'll take
people,
the
now,
hit for
just sit
that.
tight, okay?
Bad commissioner, bad commissioner.
Yeah.
Do we have any other comments from the, or questions?
No.
Okay.
The board in the picture, where was that? Near the existing shed, is that?
Yeah, that's right around, back down here near this.
Okay, there,
Yeah.
all right.
It's, it's like in an elevation, really low elevation, it blocks the water, so,
This is the edge, there's two separate wetlands delineated back here, and the shed that we were looking at for the complaint.
No, understood,
It's
I'm
right
just
there.
trying to understand it in relation to the abutters.
So that redirects water, is that, the placement of that made water redirected around it, is that?
Turned into two separate wetlands.
can't talk unless she tells you to.
Excuse me. Do we have any other comments or questions from the commission? Okay. Do we have any comments from the audience? What, could you state your name, please, and?
My name's Greg Morris, I'm part of the Rubo 313
Okay,
here as well.
okay.
Uh,
and
Is
your-
that, Greg, Morris, did you say M-O-R-S?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay, gotcha.
Brian used to park a trailer in that corner. He started building up that whole corner and cutting back vegetation to the point where that trailer was parked in one of those wetlands they claim is two now.
Mhm.
When that filled, it became, under the surveyor's opinion, two separate wetlands. That used to be all one.
Mhm.
Not only does the pea stone need to be removed and the board, which is inviting beaver damming, so to speak, but that run needs to be dredged about 6 to 8 inches directly next to that flag that was placed on the tree, or directly next to the tree. That was all one run, and it goes under Edwards and goes out to the sea. They're not
It's
separate.
also like the runoff of the neighborhood.
Mhm.
It starts at McCarthy, cuts across the properties, through the empty lot, under Edwards, and out to the sea, to the best of our knowledge. With the heavy rains we've had recently, it veered its ugly head.
So there's a network of properties. What happened is there's 3 that were human altered. They were last properties. They got done, permitted. There's one on McCarthy opposite this 313, and then the adjacent lots on the other side. So they're on 2 sides, and there's a culverted system, and they're getting cut off. They're getting filled in the culverts. You've got boards going on. You've got people filling and then putting vehicles on both of them. Art was here, and Art was here, maybe not Rick, when somebody came about the McCarthy lot in about 2017, and we haven't been able to solve that because they have to deal with Last, and Last hasn't done it hasn't done anything on the property. And then on this adjacent lot that's the one he's talking about, the property owner didn't do the work, so we'd have to enforce on that person to bring them in. So it's a little difficult to do that. I don't know what their story is. Yeah.
Are you of the opinion if the pea stone is removed and the boards are removed, and we just see if the drainage returns
He
to?
also filled in on
Yeah.
Edwards Road,
I have pictures.
Well, we gotta wait, so.
and he
Wait,
has
wait,
pea stone
so your
over there.
name is?
Oh, Florence Rubo, 313 here as well. So then he had a small trailer, then he went to the big trailer, then he moved the big trailer, not even his property, he filled it in and put more pea stone and parked that big trailer there. Bill shows up, the day Bill showed up, that trailer has disappeared and never been back on the property. So that is part of the wetlands, I believe, that he filled in, that is Nathan's property. So that's all the one same flow of wetlands.
Mhm.
So my yard, I've lived there for 41 years, I have never had water past my shed into my backyard, and it floods all the time now. And I don't know if it's because that garage, 2-car garage, we never got notice of that, or the addition, and that was built spring of 2021. So I don't know if adding things is making the water level go up. I don't know what it all does, but now I have that part of my yard, and then I have the part over by McCarthy Street that floods. And it's all because the water can't flow. So my whole backyard is like, in the winter, if it was wet, it would be like an ice skate. And that's my concern, is in adding all this, it's only like a third of an acre, and he's got a 24 by 24, a 20 by 20, I don't know what his house is. And then he's added walkways, pavement, there's no drainage to any of that.
He also pulled back.
What's your name
Excuse
for
me,
the record?
State your name, please.
Jocelyn Foley.
What,
15
Jocelyn, what,
15 McCarthy Road,
last name?
Foley, Foley.
And what would you,
He cut back the wetlands when he moved in there in 2008. He cut back,
He filled it in, he brought in a bulldozer and
pulled all
tons
of,
of dirt and filled in. The wetlands used to only be about 10 feet from the house.
I have
And he has
pictures
filled in and
of it.
built a lawn, an enormous lawn on the wetlands.
It's all grass now. There's no wetlands anymore.
She can show you pictures of what it was and what it looks like now.
What is your name?
Maureen Foley, 15 McCarthy.
Maureen
That's what
Foley.
it is now.
Wasn't that part of the discussion before, Bill, when we looked at the historical pictures and the wetland changes?
Yeah, we did. So we looked at the property and it looked like in 99s, you know, 92, 99, there were plenty of trees. And then somewhere between 2001, 2005, preceding owner, some trees vanished. So that seems to be an issue. I looked at the elevations based on what we have on the town floodplain map. You have a 14, a 13, and a 12 over there. I looked specifically to see if any additional trees got cut, and there are no signs of them being cut except branches that would have been leaning out, you know, into the yard. So I'm not seeing evidence of cutting, okay? So I'm having a hard time with that part being assigned to roads. However, there's clear filling on his property that he's willing to get rid of. The pavement, and I'm making this long, sorry, the pea gravel and the board. However, the dynamics are pretty difficult over there. You have culverts that get blocked. They cause problems. There's no maintenance. You have trees that die naturally and get in the way. And then there's been some filling going on. And it could be roads and it could be others, okay? It could be anybody. It could be us, you know what I mean? So we don't have any, if we don't have any evidence of that, it's difficult. We have a complaint, but what's gonna end up happening is, like in the case of Weymouth and they own on 505 South River, I'm gonna have to enforce on the person who owns the property, and then on roads, and then roads might bring in the Rubo here, so it just continues. So I'm trying to stay on this property personally for the commission's sake and for the public to get as much as possible, but there's some dynamics that are issues.
does it make sense to see how if things improve with the pea stone removed?
Yeah,
I
think that'll
And
help.
see if the areas revegetate?
yeah, I think the area, yeah, what we want is, we want conservation markers. The question
We
is where to
have,
put
in
them.
addition to the markers, but perhaps if vegetation is in there, it will soak up some of this water.
Yeah, if you want
I
to
don't-
plant, is that what I'm hearing? You want to add
Well,
plants?
no, I'm just asking, no, to let it revegetate naturally and see what
Yes.
happens before we ask for any more alteration to the area. Remove what's been filled, what we've seen is
So we're
that
on
we
this-
know of is the pea stone, not allow any parking or further inclusions, and then further incursions, encroachment into that area. And perhaps the conservation markers need to be moved further up gradient
Right, so a couple
to
dynamics.
allow more vegetation.
Hold on. So to your point, Commissioner Karen, Hearing Officer Karen, I would say yes and yes. However, the kind of plants that are going to come back as the sunbursts are going to be the quick-growing vines. We're going to get a lot of briar in
So
there.
invasives and not,
Opportunistic in that case, but invasives as well can take over. Short of having a planning plan, you're not going to get everything you want. I don't think we should burden with that and get into multi-years. I think what you want to do is you want to protect from the roads property as much as you can, remove as much as the hardscape as you can, get that board out, get the pavement out, and that's that. And then we monitor this, and then, you know, if there's going to be some filling going on in that property next door, we need some evidence of that. Because every time I hear about these properties, it's all anecdotal, and I saw somebody and blah, blah, blah. And I get that a fair amount, and it doesn't always bear out. No offense to anybody. Wait, just other properties in general.
well, I'm interested in what other people think about a solution to this, but one thing that comes to mind, excuse me, is first removing the pea stone, but perhaps what we need to do is move those conservation markers up
Yeah.
gradient, perhaps to the 25.
Yeah, because there's a
To
12
allow more,
elevation, yeah.
do people feel like that's reasonable? Does that
Mhm.
make any sense?
I,
I'm sorry, John, you have a question or a comment?
Right, moving the conservation markers out to the 25 would basically eliminate
Most of the yard.
the majority of the lawn. I mean, if we could go halfway or some, 10 feet out or something
Yeah,
to
10
that.
Yeah, it is a
that
tight
extent.
lot, I understand, yeah.
It has been lawn for
A long time.
15 plus years, since before. A lot of it's been lawn since prior to when the roads took ownership of the property.
No,
So-
absolutely not.
okay,
That is
okay,
not
all right, duly
Excuse me,
noted,
excuse me.
thank you, all
Excuse me.
right. Commissioner Karen, I am noticing there's a 13 elevation. Eric, would you please circle that a little bit so everybody can see? That down below that, there's a 13 elevation, and I think on the town floodplain map, which I can't say is actually correct, that was a 12 right about there. So, somewhere in there is a 12 to a 13, and I think if you pushed out your conservation markers a little bit, it would help a lot, get that stuff, that hardscape out, but going back in there and resolving all the many issues that are actually contributing to this, the naturally dead trees, the fill that's in the pipes, somebody came in and filled on McCarthy, somebody filled on Edward, there's some troubles down at 9 Edward we're dealing with now, all that, they have to be dealt with one by one, and if you want me to start going after last on McCarthy, and then whoever owns this adjacent lot that's, then we're gonna be pretty busy, and I don't think that's the intent.
One question, I heard about culverts, is that within the vacant lot?
They're in the streets underneath Edward, from one wetland to the next, and then there's another one over on McCarthy also, over on the opposite side of Rubo. So there's a whole system in there. You see these trees that Eric's kind of highlighting, and they're communicating, and they're an existing wetland that's been filled with streets, culverts, and houses. And they're all isolated vegetated wetlands now, extremely difficult for parties other than Eric and I or a qualified wetland scientist like John to identify. Other departments are not gonna be able to pick this up. It's just, they're difficult to identify. These are unique.
I believe though, on the map, it shows 2 wetlands, and I believe with him backing his trailer in, pushing all the, debris in, that's why John Zimmer, on his map, it shows it separate, but it was all one wetland, but I just think, I don't know how long he had the trailer, and then he got a bigger one, and just backing it all the way up to my tree, I think it just kept pushing stuff in, and that's what my boyfriend Greg asked Brian to help him remove it. We spoke to him.
I offered to dredge this, whatever you'd call a natural run, a divot run, and he said he was all set. Put the board up, and all that did was invite more beaver
Wow.
damming.
Okay, just
Well,
real quick, so that's an
Right.
activity dredge and that kind of stuff, so if you guys go do that on your property, we've had this conversation one more time, please see Eric or me, you're gonna have to get a permit from the commission, okay? You guys know what's going on now, we didn't make you flag,
I
Okay.
offered to help
yeah,
the
I'm
owner
just
of
trying to
that.
set a table correctly for the future, okay?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
so it seems to me that the best we can do to address this problem of flooding is to get things as natural as they can. Remove the things, the encroachment at this point, and try to maybe we can bring those markers up a little bit further out to allow more vegetation to fill in and to prevent any, hopefully that will address some of the collection of water and allow the flow to return as it was from what you're describing. We can only work in this hearing for what we see right here on this particular property, and it sounds like it's more complicated than that. So, does that,
What about the pile of dirt? Where's that gonna go?
Which
That
pile of
huge
dirt
pile
flow?
of dirt
From
in
the
his yard.
foundation.
You have the
hole.
picture up there.
So he hasn't specifically called that out, but, he can't be going and spreading that on his yard, because that's
You
not,
see how
hold
they
on a
already
second,
did that,
that's not an activity that was explained on this NOI after the fact. What he can do is he can get the addition finished, he can remove the stuff that the commission tells him, he can put the conservation markers where the commission tells him, and the board comes out, and the paved area comes out, and he gets to keep the walk, which was also unpermitted, but that dirt needs to get out of there or be reused on the
Perhaps
site.
they're trying to
For the
keep it filled.
excavation of the foundation?
It is.
Well, what happened was they excavated it. I watched them take trailer after trailer of dirt out, and then they left that pile, so I thought he was gonna just level his yard to make it all flat. He
That's
took
what he
out a
did.
big rock.
That's what he was
That's what he
trying to
did.
do.
It might
So-
be used for
so
backfill,
this-
though, after they put the
So
forms in.
you guys look in the back, you can see the staked erosion control, so he's put erosion control around it. He has taken corrective action. He's got a good contractor. I talked to both of them. I said, you need to do something about that. The neighbors are concerned. You need to get under control so it doesn't get on their properties and slip in the wetlands. And you probably want to have that as a condition that it can't be used as fill on the property.
Yes,
Because
yes,
there
that should be.
may be alterations. It's very difficult to know the 12 versus that the town has for a floodplain map and that surveyed 13 that's there. So I wouldn't allow this to stay, personally.
So if he fills in the foundation, right, and that raises his, yard even higher because he's filling in around the cement,
With proper
now
runoff.
it's gonna have more of a runoff into my yard.
And he's
Okay, no.
pumping out of his
In my
basement.
yard.
We have another abutter.
I'm
Linda.
sorry, could you,
My
what's
name
your
is
name?
Linda Blackburn. I live at 11 McCarthy Road, and my issue is all the water. All the water in the past 10 years has been pushed into my garage, and my garage is flooding, and all down my driveway and into Flo's yard. It's a lot of water.
It's a lot of water.
Yeah. You never had this problem before.
Eric, are we able to pull up the flood maps
Yeah.
to show the
I used to
contours,
be
to see?
100% in the flood zone.
Yeah, it changed in 2020, as you guys know, and it's now out of the flood zone,
Yeah.
so some of these were pretty ambitious on the part of the federal agency, as you know,
Yep, I
and the
know,
town worked hard to
Okay.
get that resolved.
which I appreciate.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, not me, I think other departments, but thanks for thanking me.
But it's just a lot of water.
I'll take everything I get.
Take it, but, yeah.
It can be rough. You know?
It just sounds like that system that's existed there for a long time, that takes water out to the
Contours,
sea,
Eric. Yeah.
just isn't functioning anymore.
Yeah.
Not since he moved in.
I
Not
suspect,
since he filled in the front lawn that I just showed you. Ever since then. Ever since then. He pulled out all the bushes and he brought in backhoes and he filled it all in and planted grass.
Why didn't anybody say anything about that then? 'Cause you
Because we
didn't.
assumed that he had a permit to
We
do
just
it, but
thought
then
he
he
knew
just
what he
kept
was
going
doing.
and going. He would do a little bit at a time and a little bit at a time and a little bit at a time. So
Yeah,
now he
but
has
I
like
s-
30 feet.
I spoke to him, because I never used to be able to see his house, because there was a growth there.
Overgrowth?
He told me it was poison ivy, he killed everything.
He
Took
actually
everything out.
cut it back a good 10, 15 feet into this area that we're.
We need
So, Eric,
documentation.
I like the
Gonna know,
contours.
but it would be nice.
Excuse me, can we let Commissioner speak?
Do you have to change the view, so it
Yeah, I
just,
can switch it up here.
There's a 2 and there's a 1, but you have to be in the right level in order for it to show up.
Is there a reason we didn't get notice on this? 'Cause
If you don't
this
apply
could all
for,
been-
if you don't apply for a permit and notice of intent, there are,
No,
there's
no,
no
that's not
requirement.
the
There was, for
question.
this hearing, you did get notice.
So,
No, I
After
meant,
complaints.
no, we didn't get proper notification of this.
so you're talking about the
garage wall.
notice of intent that's in front of you right now. Why didn't you get notified?
Aren't abutters supposed to be notified of
Right.
any kind of
So
construction?
what it is this,
Not-
is you have to have timely notice under a town bylaw filing. And this was submitted to you to meet the town bylaw requirements. So it's been sent out. Now, I don't know why you haven't received it, but we have got records
There you
that.
go.
No.
Bill, no, that's not what we meant.
No, I
We
think,
meant
are you referring to the,
notice of
excuse
the
me,
building of the,
you're talking about the garage?
building permit?
building.
The garage,
yes.
wasn't the garage permitted under an RDA?
Yes, it
RDA,
was,
so
and what
that's why you
happened
weren't-
there
I'll
is
explain that to you.
different from this one, Flo and Greg and everybody, that this is a notice of intent, so within 100 foot, all abutters get notified of the legal notice. On an RDA, you see it in the paper, and the last one was an RDA, because we didn't know where the wetland was at the time. What was driving it was, there was a floodplain, there was a floodplain issue, and the commission needed to have a permit, and the RDA was appropriate at that point in time. Then the
Do you understand the difference, what that means?
What the RDA?
An RDA is a
RDA 's
request for determination of applicability, and it's a lower level of permitting that doesn't require a butter notification, and that's why you didn't get one. This is at a higher level now, it's at a notice of intent because of the addition and the unpermitted work. So that's why you did get a butter notification. So that might, so it wasn't It's not something that was
Different types of
overlooked,
permit.
it was, we were following the regulations.
Road, I got a letter, I don't have got it, about his 20 by 22.
I think they had, that was an NOI back then, I'm gonna have to guess on that, and you're within 100 feet apparently of that
Is
property.
that from conservation or
Look
from?
at,
Zoning.
Zoning is 300 feet,
Zoning
okay?
has a different.
Yeah, they have
standard.
300 feet flow,
that's
okay?
at elevation 12.
Yeah.
And then, are
It
any
gets-
of you from 11, from,
Board of Appeals.
That 11 lot,
That's me.
yeah,
That's you.
Okay.
That's Linda?
she has water
I have water, a lot of water.
So you're down
Well,
gradient though.
I have
is-
pictures.
That's where the second wetland is, and that's roughly where the board crosses too.
You say second. This
There's
is
two,
one
I know,
lot.
we know that. I mean, the whole place is wetlands, okay? But it's now, they're individual isolated vegetative wetlands.
Because of
We had
that.
the Act in 72, and there's certain things that the isolated vegetative wetland evolved around 2002. So it's a little complicated. You're right in theory, but what exists now and what's by bylaw is separate individual isolated vegetative wetlands, and that's the logic.
That's what I'm asking to be dredged back to normal.
You need a permit for that, that's all I'll say.
I strongly would, and I believe it's on his property. Would I be allowed to pull a permit or?
No,
change
not on his property. You'd have to get his permission.
Then how could we get that addressed? Can this be part of this? Because.
No,
It can't be part of this.
this
We
activity
can
did not
only,
include that.
Jurisdictionally, we're only looking at what is in front of us right now. That's just the way the constraint works.
Sure.
We would need a specific permit that detailed exactly what was happening.
When you file,
Engineered.
to Commissioner Karen's exact point, you have a category, okay, you fit within that. The commission has, as per prior conversations, allowed things to be bundled. Category ones are a variety of things, okay? So this is a category one after the fact. And that's all they can do is the activity they're discussing, unless the commission puts special conditions on them. And typically, something like dredging is not gonna be worked into it, that's a separate permit.
It's an overstatement. I'm talking 6 to 8 inches of what he filled.
So,
And it's bottlenecked, and I even showed it to yourself and, Mr. Flint, that it's beaver dammed now. And it's causing Linda a ton of water, Flo's yard a ton of water, and probably your yard as well.
I think the commission already has also talked about pulling some of that stuff out, getting all that pea stone pile out and getting that board out, which is
That's
right
on
in
the
right in the
inside.
back.
Part of it.
Right.
And then the
Understood.
little,
well, I think some of your concerns are about future things, and the commission is already identifying a little bit more upgrading and positioning of the conservation markers. Now you have a demarcation, they're supposed to let it go wild, he's not supposed to cut in there. It's going to be tempting, it's gonna get out of control, but he's not supposed to touch down gradient. So the special conditions will say, in perpetuity, they can't do anything down gradient, no more fill, no more nothing.
So you understand, we're dealing, this sounds like a larger problem that may or may not
Yeah,
be
that's true.
solved by everything that we're doing here. So people might need to, you may need to come back to us with some suggestions and perhaps hire someone like a wetland scientist or an engineer to come up with a plan and perhaps a solution that we would then have to approve. But at this point, what we're asking him to do is pull out all of the pea stone, pull out the board, and we're suggesting that these conservation posts that we're talking about are do not disturb. They demarcate that this is protected resource area and you cannot go back there.
So where are we gonna put those?
They're on the site plan, do you see them? But well, we have to still determine that. I'm wondering if we should come more up gradient.
Yeah, I agree.
They're right on the wetland line at this point, and I know that it's a tight lot, and I hear what John says, I was on the site, it is small, but given the level of problems and impacts that they're having, it seems to make sense if we can get a little more of that area not, left undisturbed, and see if it improves. And if it does not, and there are still problems, I think we have a bigger issue, and we need to go at that with separate
solve this
notices
water
of intent, and consult with the commission, Kamenetsky Bill or Eric, for advice on what to do, and the best solution in permitting for that.
I
Does
hear
make
that
sense?
exactly. The three wetlands, the one across the
This
street.
is a complicated thing.
Yeah, and the one that you're talking about, and the one that you pointed out with the pallets and all that, that's gonna require, we just talked about writing letters around Holly Hill, this is gonna require that too, and then serious follow-up.
Yeah, I'm not confident any of this is gonna fix it.
I don't either.
Yeah, I'm
And the
not
thing is I know neighbors have tried to fix and done goodwill and cleared the culverts, but it's not enough, because it keeps coming back.
But right now, it's all we can do.
Right, this is
Right.
all what we have before us, to
Right,
people.
So it will probably be insufficient to address some of these water issues, but what we have in front of us right now is what it is, and I think the best we can do
Yep.
is to remove the pea stone, remove the boards, remove the
Paved area.
concrete, the paved area, and I would recommend that those conservation markers move another 10 feet up gradient.
Does it make sense for, perhaps Eric, you're familiar with the property, and Eric, go out into the field, perhaps with John, and actually, we're just throwing around numbers, but if you're on site, come up with the best, relocating these conservation markers to be a little bit more aggressive and more protecting the resource area. And then we'll have an updated site plan once you agree on the spots.
Yeah, but you
Does
want
that
to
make
set a
sense?
12 noon Friday deliverable, and so this gets done. John, who did the plan?
John, what do you think about that? Does that make sense to site these in the field?
Yeah, I think that will be fine, and what we could possibly do is maybe leave the first two where they are, or have them come out a little bit, but then increase it as you get back
down.
towards the Rubos property a little bit, and give them a little bit more of a vegetated buffer
Yes,
than they have now.
Do these markers stay permanent?
yes, they are. They're in perpetuity, and if they rot or they fall down, they have to be replaced.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why wouldn't we, from my perspective, be more aggressive? I mean, I'm looking at this elevation 13 on John Zimmer's plan, and I just saw Eric flash an elevation 11. So that means that's been filled by 2 feet.
Go back and
So-
show that elevation 11 where that was, because I'm not certain.
I may be on an island here, but
Truckloads of dirt.
Well, there is.
why not require them to take that all out, everything that they
Where's the
filled?
11?
In those pictures I showed you, you can see the elevation
What's a
of the
12?
land.
It's a 12.
12.
Look at the
It,
slope from
it
the
may be a
house.
13 now, but that might not have been surveyed in the field, that might have been
That's all
estimated.
flat
I don't know how they got those.
Nope, the other one, no. Yes,
Yeah.
look at the slope from the front porch.
That's coming.
See on the right where the front of the house
That
is?
13 doesn't show up there at all.
But it just seems like we have one property that's adversely affecting several properties,
40 feet, it's gotta be 40 feet.
and this is our jurisdiction.
And
I
all
mean,
of
this
us have
happened a long
lived
time
there
ago.
For a long time. We've all lived there for a long time.
So, I don't know, you
That's
want a
what I'm
new
saying, we're
addition?
coming back.
You did a garage and nobody knew about it? Take that stuff out.
No,
Oh, the
Rick,
garage
you were
was
the hearing
permitted with an
officer on
RDA.
the
Permitted? Oh,
RDA.
I thought it was.
The garage
So,
is permitted.
Rick, you were the hearing officer on the RDA. We actually explored the wetland. We thought at the time that it was beyond the 100, so we didn't know where John flagged it. We didn't know it was there. We thought it was further back. It was primarily due to the flood zone. That's why they got the RDA. Otherwise, they would trigger an NOI for that. Everybody would know what's going on, and maybe some of the stuff might not have happened.
So it's
But that's the
evolved.
tricky thing about isolated vegetated wetlands. I thought there was one in there, but I didn't go looking for every single detail on it. The commission at the time did not have the appetite for this kind of stuff, and so I applaud this commission for getting this job done
Another
here.
drawing for Nick.
Can anybody answer the question, when you add foundations and build, like his garage and this new one, what does that do to displacement of water? Does that raise it? Could that be part of the
Thank you.
problem?
Like, cause he's already pumping from his cellar. He pumps
Out
from
to
his
the
cellar
wetlands.
out to the wetlands, so
Behind
we're
the
getting
Rubo
that
shed.
water too.
He's pumping it from what he dug to put his addition. He's pumping from the basement into what he dug out to the wetlands. Every day, every time it rains.
Okay, so I had talked to my predecessor about a property that was working on the groundwater that was very high water table. And so you have probably got this property now with a foundation going down to the water table that's probably around 12. And so they're hitting water, and they gotta get the water out. It's a temporary thing, and what do you do with it? It's clean water, it's not contaminated, it's from the groundwater, and it communicates underground to the 12 and the wetlands. So I said, they're doing this with the salt marsh. He said, that's the best they can do in some cases. So sometimes you'll have a silt sock and have some filtration. We did that with a guy in Creek once, but it's a standard practice. You don't take it off site. you don't treat it, you don't put tertiary treatment on it to make it potable water or anything like that. It needs to go, it's in the way of the construction, and it's part of nature, they hit the water table, that's what's going on. I thought they were talking about the basement or something, and they were pushing
So
water
they're
out.
dewatering the
It's
site
basement. It's coming
for
from the
construction.
basement.
It's coming from the foundation that's new, correct?
No, it's coming from the basement in their house.
From the basement.
That's what I
that big
thought,
hole,
then that's a different issue.
and then
Into
into
the hole,
the wetlands.
into the wetlands.
So we get these too, and sometimes they go into river systems, and that's an issue. And so they need to discharge, somewhere, they have to, anybody would have to. So, this is all brand new, I didn't know this was going on.
I have pictures of it.
Okay.
We worry
So-
that if you take a bowl of water, like our groundwater, and you put another bowl in it or foundation, that water distributes
Exactly.
everywhere else.
Yeah, of course.
So we're worried that the additional foundation will create that. In addition, it also removes 20 by 20 drainage.
Well, you're taking a permeable space and it's no longer really permeable,
Right.
right? What was it before? Lawn?
Right.
Grass before?
Okay, so
Okay. So
we are still
Oh,
constrained with what we can do right
That's a
here
little bit.
tonight
Right, we are,
by what we have in front of us.
right.
There's a
So
scuba
I think
diver in
we
there.
have to do the best we can with what we have.
Right. We can't address that until we have more facts and have that addressed separately. For right now, what we need to do is solve this problem, and the only thing we can do is remove what they've agreed to, what looks like, with the pea stone, allow things to naturally revegetate, and I'm hearing that you think the wetland markers should go further up gradient than we had suggested.
I'd go upgrade
10
it and
feet.
I'd restore the wetland, is what I would do. That's what I'm thinking.
If you look at this drawing, and you compare this drawing to that drawing, these appear to be different, and if you could use your imagination, let's say, and the 14 line is still the 14 line, and then around the house, one would guess it's still going to be in the range of 14, maybe 12, but here in the drawings, it's showing 15, 16.
Right.
So
Things are higher,
they're higher,
absolutely.
and you can argue about whether they're a foot, but you could infer from this that they're
It's
3 or
volume.
4 feet.
Well, you have volume, is what you're saying, really.
Yeah.
And the volume may be also an issue, so that was an important pickup by the commission, because if he's gone up by a foot, then that area there that's 12 should stay 12, and that's losing capacity of the wetland, and that might help out the situation, and it's on his property. So, when I first looked at this, I looked at the aerials, and it looked like the 1992, if I could do this, it would be great. Can we show them this? I think it's good, instructive. Sorry to put you through it, but this is what we do to get to a place that we can make quick decisions, because tonight we can't. And I think there's a demarcation line around 2005, which I think you'll see here, and you start to wonder if this happened before these guys purchased the property. That's all I'm saying, based on this. But you're right, Joe, you picked it up. And I don't know when those 12 was done. It might have been done in the 70s and still being used.
Is there any benefit to continuing this and get additional information about
We
this
could, yeah.
drainage and the fill?
You actually
Would
could,
people
but I
feel-
mean, you know,
I'm
they,
suggesting perhaps we continue this until we have additional information about this fill and what our proposed solutions are, or we can be aggressive with the conservation markers, removal of the fill.
and plantings.
So those,
another option.
those are, pardon me?
Another option could be planting in that back corner of the yard
Yeah.
where I think we have kind of the gap between the two wetlands as currently delineated.
Mm-hmm.
Where there's currently pea stone
Yeah.
here, there's definitely room for
Yeah.
plantings in here, and that would seem to
Yeah.
help out with some of the downstream flooding issues that are
Mhm.
happening.
Put
on
willows in
neighboring
there, it
properties.
would soak up a tremendous amount of water, and everybody's gotta let those grow. They're not the big ones like weeping willows, but like the shrubs. And if you put those in there, they'll soak up a lot of water, and now nature's doing a ton of the work for you, and it takes some pressure off. There are no willows over there that I saw, but I think they do pretty decently in that environment because it's wet. You know, it is definitely hydric.
Bill, I think we'd be amenable to putting in willows in that area as well as the areas along the wetland where the pea stone's coming out, the other area, which is closer to the wetland boundary. We could also put some willows in that spot as well.
Yeah, because they'll put off shade and they'll compete pretty well, I think, with the briar and with the bittersweet and stuff like that. Even though they're vines and they'll crawl all over them, they're tenacious enough they can fight back and put shade off. And the way they win is by putting shade and not allowing the vines to grow as much.
What about the street stormwater system? Do we have the layout of that?
I don't, Bert. I just can tell you, I think it goes under the street and Kirk stories.
I think with the volumes of water we're talking about, it's gonna be difficult for we're dealing with a small area. We can maybe help it a little bit, but I don't
Yeah,
think we're gonna.
short of going
Right,
in there
I'm
with
not
a
sure
big,
it's gonna
huge set of
solve.
equipment and with careful care under a qualified wetland science, we're gonna make a disaster out of it. And there's been filling going on. We need to find the property owner and tell him there's a problem, and do what I did with Billy last Junior and give him 5 conservation markers to say, here, post these, which never got done. So, that was goodwill, and to do the same thing with the next person. After that happens and fails, then you start requiring it, but I know the commission doesn't want us to go after those right now,
Well, I want to stick to what we're going to do for this particular problem. I
Yeah.
hear what you're saying,
Yeah,
Bill.
let's
It's
try to
a
get it out.
much larger problem. So,
We all assumed he was gonna take that dirt and add more. There's already major problems.
So control of that dirt would be a good thing for the neighbors and no more fill. I think if we go look at this, Eric's got it, it's not exactly what I had in mind, but if you move forward in time, where are we, in 2001? See, you're pretty well vegetated back in there still, it looks to me anyways, okay? And then a lot of this gets cleared at some point around 2005.
No, later than that.
That's 2000.
All right, so,
2008.
yeah, and they came in around 2010, so it was the predecessor. I based upon my review of the town aerials, I thought
It's
it was
small,
the
you're right, it's
predecessor
not a tiny
had
area.
possibly filled and cut trees on the subject site.
No, they didn't.
They never did.
No, they did
That was
not.
my
It's more from
interpretation.
the fill than it is any of the
Never.
building.
That whole lot is.
But how could we
Both said
permit
was-
additional building going on
I
when you
can
got
put you in contact with the
a whole
person who
neighborhood
owns it.
sitting here in front of
I was
us
best friends
saying
with
they're underwater?
Do it.
I
Who
can't
said
do
the
it.
whole lot
I
was
won't do it.
Okay,
I won't do it.
2 owners ago.
What do you wanna do?
so I think
Well,
we
isn't
need
this
to
after the fact?
decide
It's already there.
how
right?
far we want to go here. Do we want to accept moving the marker, everything that's given, moving the markers up gradient, accepting plantings in the 2 areas that John has identified? Or do we want to make him remove fill
Yep,
in addition to all those things?
which,
I do. And you know why? And you know why I'm so adamant about this? Because I've been a victim of the same sort of stuff, just like you.
It's a
Because
lot
not
of
only am I
water.
a commissioner, I'm also a Marshfield homeowner, right? And I'm dealing with water problems on my own. So I can't in good conscience sit here and let that happen, let additional building go on, knowing all this new information about all this filling and stuff.
right.
I can't do it. And then you see the pictures, he's creating more water problems for himself at the same time.
Right.
Well, so to that point, Rick, I hear you, and I feel your pain, because I've been with you side by side on that one. However, it's very difficult. If you look at the aerials that I looked at, it's hard to demarcate exactly when it happened. I don't get the feeling that Rhodes did the fill. I feel like it happened before. And there's no one-
We're telling you.
Okay. All the residents have said otherwise, and they've said that in writing. Okay, they all said that this guy filled, etc. I'm just saying I don't have the evidence of it. Okay, if I had before and after pictures that showed me the exact
just
date,
showed
then
you
I,
some.
well, did somebody see here when, do we know when roads filled exactly? So I don't know if you can assign that to them, that's the only thing. Whereas we know what happened with the permitted stuff that affected you. We clearly know that, right? And we know the dynamics that allowed that. In this case, Joe's picked it up, and I sort of was the same concern, was that 13 versus the 11 versus the 12, something happened. I don't know if you could pin that on roads or not. I tried to check out the trees carefully to see if he might have cut or somebody might have cut. They're all natural, that are knocked down in the wetlands. So, I think if you go with the upgradient markers, you get some buffer zone plantings, you get the wetland plantings with the willows. That should help alleviate some pressure. There's a ton of new things that they're concerned about that it would have been great if they were in the written complaint, so then we could address them, but they aren't even in there,
Well,
so,
we could continue
yeah,
for more information.
yeah. These guys have been hanging on that foundation, there's a big hole there, that's the only thing I'm gonna say.
I'd support a
Well,
continue.
Yeah, I think we're talking about some serious issues here that we are not, I think that we need to,
How many
Do you agree?
commissioners support a continuation?
I'm ready to vote.
Joe will continue, Arthur will continue, I will
I'll
continue.
continue.
5-1, okay. So the poll was continue.
Could I please request if
Yes.
you do end up continuing, that you provide me with a list of the supplemental information that you're looking for? I don't know, Mr. Rose has indicated to me that he has not imported any fill into the property. And, going out and doing soil testing may or may not show that there's fill there, but like Bill was saying, there's no evidence that Mr. Rhodes actually filled. He indicated to me that he did not, so I take him at his word. This, like we discussed, is a bigger issue than this one single property.
right,
This one single property cannot generate that much water to affect all the surrounding properties. It's the issue associated with the wetland that's in the undeveloped property and the lack of maintenance in there. And it extends all the way down Careswell Street. I was out at a site behind 335 Careswell. There's a drainage channel there that hasn't been maintained, by the town, and it just backs up the flow. So I don't know that we can attribute this one property to all the issues that are in the area. And, and even the portion of the wetland system that's to the north, that system is very small. It does not extend any further than my flags show. That's basically a finger, and a little small isolated finger that, it's isolated now with respect to the bylaw definition from the one to the south. But even that little area is not going to contribute a significant amount of water or drainage down into the other wetland because it's so small. So I guess I have a hard time wrapping my head around this one property being the source of all the issues in the neighborhood. It's a
We
bigger
didn't get
systemic
water
problem.
before.
Just to
like this.
summarize, hold on, guys.
Never.
So they got pulled out of the floodplain, that's number one, so that's that, but you still got water issues. I see the trickling going on, and the culverts aren't maintained. There are trees dying all over the place because they've grown to full growth, they're maxed out, and they're coming down, and they're causing blockages naturally. Some people are also going in and doing some fill. This is midnight dumping, you can't control it. We aren't ninjas to go in the evening to stop it, it just happens. We've started making some progress on McCarthy, and it stopped. How much effort am I gonna be putting that? I can call the guy and say, look, the commission cares about your property, every single one of them, but I'm gonna be hitting them all. So I think you have more dynamics and you need to focus on the property.
Right.
And if you need more information for the property's purpose, then that's what you do. But I think you can condition the thing and get it done. They need to get that foundation in, you have them where you want them, you can get the mitigation you want, or you can continue, and it probably won't change a whole lot. That's all I'm saying.
John, can you have a planting plan to us, it would have to be Friday.
Friday, 12 noon,
Friday,
John,
12
that's
noon,
it, or else it's
and we'll
continuing.
recite these more aggressive, moving the conservation posts out to 10 feet to people?
Yes.
Or is this too rushed for the other commissioners? Do you want a chance to revisit this? Does that make sense to you?
I worry that no matter what you do, you're not going to be able to prove what happened
Yeah.
when you take a look at these drawings. And I certainly side with Rick's concerns. And when I look at the drawings, I could make a case either way, it certainly seems to me. I can't, we always work on good evidence.
Right,
And I don't know if we're really ever going
Find
to
it.
get to that good evidence standard.
right.
And so if we postpone, all we're doing is dragging down the solution to the problem and instilling bad will. I would much rather, in one side, try to do something that's positive, try to gain as much goodwill out of this as we can, and go somewhere. So that's it.
Yeah,
To Joe's point,
I think that was my initial reaction to it as well, and then I hear the seriousness of your complaints, and I'm not diminishing them. I have,
Raise the elevation.
yeah, but
and
I,
I also hear what Rick is saying, because I've had issues as well on my property.
By her own.
to
But I'm
Joe's
just
point,
wondering, what are the best solutions for the larger issue, and so,
to your point, your good summary and everything, and to Joe's point, I'm saying this, that if you, all you're gonna get is a minimal amount of refinement, minimal amount of payback with a continuation. You
Right,
have
right, so
everything,
that's-
right now, you have
right.
everything you want to condition this. We can't solve every single problem, and God knows there's always more than we actually dreamed of. We have a very, very active neighbors. Now Rhodes knows what he's gotta do. So not only do we have the commission's power, that power is also there. They're gonna do this, whatever the commission wants.
May I move that we close and issue orders of conditions?
so moved. Second. Oh, well,
Sorry.
that's okay. I mean, that's sort of where I was going, because
Yeah.
I
So I'm
think
gonna
that we
give that
have,
motion
we've got a
to
very
Susan
large
Karen.
issue, and we
Yeah.
have an issue right before us that we can hopefully make better.
Right.
No guarantees it's
No,
gonna
I'm
solve
trying to
everything,
figure out if
but
they
I
could-
think you need to come in with your complaints, with the photographs, and see what other solutions are beyond this property. We'll see how this
We'll
works.
take that
This
separately,
is
is what the
we-
commissioner
Those
is
are
saying.
separate issue. This is a big issue, and I'm not trying to minimize it, but I take Joe's point, is that we can do something right now that we should at least try to do for
So
this.
you don't think the pavement, the walkway, and any of that's added to it?
Well, they're gonna take out the pavement, they're gonna take out the
A portion of the pavement.
they're gonna take it out. Well, the
Not
commission
even
could,
two
the
car
commission
garage.
could tell them to take it all out. That's just, well, wait a minute, how do you know
The
that?
cut, it shows a.
Yeah, but the commission could have them take it all out if they want.
We can put whatever conditions.
We can
we
do
want.
See,
whatever
the
we
way,
want.
Greg, so the commission has discretionary authority to condition, okay? And that's the way it is.
So let
You
me
and I
ask-
can't do anything.
Okay, we've proposed mitigation in the form of more aggressive conservation posts and now plantings. Are people satisfied with the amount of bituminous concrete being removed in the 25? Within the 25?
Well, you could take all the driveway out and make it stone.
What I've been
Um,
trying to figure out is if that could be regraded to carry more water out of that common corner between the three lots that seems to be the problem. I'm not a civil engineer. I don't know, John. Bob Crawford, look at that, any way to regrade to carry the water out of that area?
Which portion of it, Bert?
Well, the complaints seem to be like the common, right around where Eric's circling, right around the wetland there. That's the low point, correct?
Yes. Yeah, before you get into the wetland itself.
And I'm just trying to figure out if something changed, that it used to go out into the street, during heavy rains. If they're getting all these issues, I haven't got an answer.
Well, John, you're right. It kind of needs a neighborhood solution, not just this one property to
Right.
fix this water problem. I totally agree, but we got to start somewhere, and I'd rather
Yeah.
be much more aggressive
Yeah.
with conditions than a few willow trees.
Yeah, I just
and
wanted
taking
to
out a
see
little
if
bit of
there was a
asphalt.
way of
Sorry.
regrading that would help it, along with the other things. But,
Are they allowed to build a 73-foot house in a 0.33 acre lot?
they got permits to do it.
No, the permit was obtained under the radar.
Well,
So
no,
keep
not,
saying
not,
that.
yeah,
I
but
think we keep going back to that.
to make that clear,
There's a motion on the
That's-
floor.
Right.
so there's, yeah, the permit
So-
is separate, so they didn't come on their radar, they just missed us because the IVW wasn't picked up.
Conditions. I'm gonna reiterate your motion. I'm gonna just reiterate Craig's motion, that I make a motion that we will close this hearing and issue orders of conditions, which we can work out right now, bringing up the 4 conservation markers up gradient to 10 feet within the 25.
So
We will-
we would need a revised plan by Friday noon with the new location of the markers, and we would need the planting plan from John showing plantings. I believe, John, we had in this corner over here where the pea stone is between the 2 wetlands, and then also along the side here. Is that what I'm getting from the
Right.
commission? That we
Yes.
want
In the upper area where the pea stone is to be removed.
Right.
Right, and then
Right.
essentially we pop up the conservation markers up gradient of this new vegetation that's gonna have 2 years of annual monitoring and 75% successive growth.
Correct.
Okay.
And then, don't forget the driveway. I heard one commissioner saying that parking area, they want all of it out, and I did hear
Didn't add
Rhodes
that.
say that he would convert it into pea gravel at one point, so, does the commission want all of that, unpermitted paved area removed and replaced with pea gravel? Is that satisfactory? That tends to be pretty pervious. It's not a flood zone. Hold on, Craig. It's kind of over for
That's
you
on the
guys.
other side of what we're talking about,
Yeah.
so,
Relevant.
that seems to not be relevant to this particular problem, so.
So they're letting that go then, okay.
John, is that okay by Friday? You can revise the site plan
Yes.
to do that, okay. All right,
Board will
And the
be
board.
removed.
And the board.
The board,
they-
exactly.
Yeah, the board comes out along with, it's an obstruction,
Okay.
to get the
All right.
obstructions out.
do I have a second?
Second,
Craig?
All in favor?
Aye.
aye.
Any-
Nay.
Okay, so we got a 5-1-0, and that's Rick, okay. Duly noted, all right, Rick. Okay, very good.
All right.
So where do we go from here?
They'll get a permit, and it's a town bylaw permit.
So,
So,
they will
he's
be,
gonna do the addition, and what's gonna happen to that pile of dirt?
That-
That wasn't in the.
that will be addressed in the order of conditions, that they can't leave that on the site.
Well, grading,
They'll
correct.
spread it.
There's
Yes,
more
and no,
grading.
there'll be no more
So no
filling or
change in
regrading.
contours,
No,
no change in contours.
no change in contours, which can be.
You can make it crystal clear that the excavated dirt needs to be removed.
Needs to be
Yes,
removed from
exactly.
the
Right,
site.
and no change in contours, bury them in one paragraph or sentence.
Yes,
I have a question. When he does
What's your
finish
name?
his new addition,
What's your
Is-
name?
what's your name,
Yes,
please, and your address?
Marion Foley, 15 McCarthy Road,
Okay.
when he does finish his addition, when he has to pump his water out of the basement, can he pump it into the wetlands?
Send me a complaint, we'll deal with that separately, okay? That came up
Has to be
tonight.
looked at on site.
I know you told the commission, just send the complaint, we'll deal with it separately.
This hearing is closed. Public comment over.
Thank you.
Commission comment over.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
John.
John.
Thanks, have a good night.
You too.
Okay, we have 2 COCs. Lynch, 25 Billings Road, still sitting
See you later.
on
Thanks.
the deed restriction.
Just an update on that one, we spoke to a lawyer who's representing the Lynches, and that is in progress. They provided us with a draft deed that Bill and I approved.
You'll have it next time, get it off the
Good,
list.
so
Yeah,
that's
thank
moving.
God, yeah.
Okay, so we vote to table until the next meeting. I move that we vote to table. Could I have a second?
Second.
All
Okay,
in
Joe.
favor? Aye.
Okay.
Okay, and now we have Belgo, now Anderson on Maycomer's Ridge. This was originally, this is an odd one. DEP actually issued the COC because they had had a superseding order of conditions. And so DEP has closed this out, but Marshfield Conservation
Greg, I can give a quick background.
Yeah,
if you
would
want.
you,
So basically, this was for the road itself. the Marshfield Conservation Commission issued orders of conditions for it, and someone appealed to DEP on it. DEP's superseding order of conditions affirmed Marshfield's approval of the project and actually issued stricter conditions on it. And then they reviewed the project and issued a certificate of compliance after a site visit back in, I don't remember the exact date, but they cleared it out.
So I vote, I move that we vote to issue a complete COC for SE 42-185. May I have a second?
Second.
187.
All in favor?
Aye.
And I move that we vote to close the Marshfield Conservation Commission meeting of September 21st, 2021. May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned.
917.
That's gotta be some kind of a record to have two